Junction meeting was a nice one though. Yeah, I loved Grand Junction. It's a nice town. Till the weather turned the next day.
Fair enough.
Awesome bookstore.
I'm not sick, I'm just
Used books.
precaution.
No, I think I have both. Both you and use right up in the downtown area.
I'm leaving next week and I don't wanna get whatever it's. Yeah.
Wherever I travel, I like to go to the bookstore.
Yeah, it's feels nice. We'll get sloths. Can you bring me back? I would, but I think it's illegal. I'll bring you back pictures.
Oh, is Jen coming?
She is gonna present virtually, and so is Crystal.
Okay, great.
How recently it was when they would send us a gigantic package.
I know, remember those gigantic packages?
Yes. I started after that,
After
but
that,
Kathy Corbett showed me
Oh, yeah,
the
Yes.
piles and I was like.
Every 2 weeks, you used to get a
Yeah.
big mailer on your
Yeah.
front deck.
it was
Or
huge.
whatever. And
Yeah.
Every
Had to cost a
project and
fortune.
staff report was printed and bounded.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work.
Huge pile.
Yeah.
This is a big pile. of
I mean, it was kind of an adjustment to not have them.
I know, it was fun. I think it was because I was looking at the way I logged the meetings
It
and
didn't kill us, it didn't kill us.
it used to be. They weren't.
We unmuted.
Yeah, you're good.
We're just waiting for our attorney to join us and then we'll start the meeting.
Speak of the devil. Devil's advocate.
Oh, good save.
We're on here.
All right, all righty. Hello, everyone. It's here in person and virtually. This is, I have called to order the Landmark Preservation Commission meeting of February 6, 2024. The first thing that we always do is introduce ourselves. Since I'm already warmed up, I will introduce myself. I'm Julie Johnson. I'm a historic preservation project manager, and I was nominated by the community at large. Graham, do you want to say?
Sure, I'm Graham Johnson. I'm a preservation project manager as well, nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
I'm Ann Wattenberg. I'm an architect nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
I'm Larry Sykes. I'm an architect nominated by History Colorado.
I'm Gary Petrie. I'm an architect and I was nominated by the Denver Planning Board.
Hi, I'm George Dennis, retired law enforcement. I was nominated by History Colorado.
I'm Nick Fusianis. I'm an architect and a developer, and I was nominated by the American Institute of Architects.
I'm Erica Warzel. I'm an architectural historian and preservation consultant nominated by the community at large. And I'm Brittany Bryant, Denver Landmark Preservation staff.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, so we don't actually have any, I will give you audio tips for all of those joining us virtually. Yes, okay.
Scroll right through those.
Sure did. For better sound quality, we strongly encourage you to download Zoom on your desktop, laptop, tablet, or mobile device. Click audio settings to bring up an additional menu. You can add background noise suppression, which can be really helpful. Test your speaker and microphone, adjust their maximum output volumes. For presenters or public commenters, when it is your turn to speak, to mute or unmute, you can click on the microphone icon at the bottom of your screen. Expanding the menu next to the microphone will reveal additional options. You can select your speaker and microphone devices, test your microphone and speakers, adjust their maximum output volumes. And if you still have audio challenges, you can switch to your phone for audio. All right, we have no meeting records for approval. So next we have always reserved at the beginning of our meeting, a public comment period. And this is for members of the public. They will have 2 minutes each for comments about historic preservation in Denver in general. This does not include any of the actual projects that we will review later in the meeting. This is just historic preservation in general. If you're joining by phone, please dial *9 on your keypad or to raise your hand, or you can email landmark@denvergov.org with your name, phone number, and what you'd like to speak about. And if you're joining via computer, just click on the little hand raise button at the bottom of the screen. Do we have anybody? Weird, nobody there? Okay, looks like we don't have anyone. All right, then next on our agenda is the consent agenda, and these are routine design review items that are recommended for commission approval without discussion. Applicants with items passed on the consent agenda should coordinate separately with the landmark preservation staff to receive their certificate of appropriateness. There is no public comment for consent agenda items. I will announce the consent agenda by address. I'll ask the commissioners to divulge any, or to see if they want to remove any items off of the consent agenda if they have questions or issues. I will also ask them to let me know if they have any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest with any of the projects. The commission will make a motion and vote. And the LPC can only consider information included in the application materials on the LPC meeting website. All right, commissioners, you've had a chance to look at the consent agenda. Anybody have any issues? Anything want to take anything on? Any questions? All right, do I hear a motion? Oh, you know what? I did not list the addresses. I'm so sorry before we do the motion. Okay. The first is 2023 COA 479 at 910 15th Street in downtown Denver. And the second is 2024 COA 060 at 128 West 4th Avenue in the Baker neighborhood. Now, commissioners, do I hear a motion? Nick,
Madam Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Nick, thank you.
Second.
And Graham has seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, the consent agenda has been approved unanimously. If you are here or joining us virtually and that one of those were your projects, you don't have to continue with the rest of the meeting. You can, of course, if you wish. But just the next thing you need to do is just get with your landmark preservation staff person that you've been working with to get your C of A. All right, let's move on then to design review process. Again, I will announce the design review items on agenda in order by address. Commission members can announce any ex parte contacts or conflicts of interest. Staff will introduce the application and make a recommendation. Commissioners can question the staff. The applicant presentation is limited to 10 minutes. Commissioners may question the applicant. Public comment period follows the applicant presentation, and that can be 2 minutes per person. If you are here in person, you'll take a seat over here to give your 2-minute comment. If you're joining us virtually, you can use a little hand raise button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're calling via phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, or email landmark@denvergov.org prior to the public comment period. Staff will clarify if necessary, the commission will deliberate, and the commission will make a motion and vote. All right, the first design review project today, we have 2 of them. The first one is 2024 COA 057 at 2914 California Street in the Curtis Park District. And our staff person is Crystal Marquez, who I understand is joining us virtually.
Should be popping up in 1 second now.
There she is. Hello, Crystal.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay.
All
Thanks.
right, begin anytime.
Okay, so this is for 2914 California Street. This is a contributing structure in the Curtis Park Historic District. The applicant is proposing to construct a new detached accessory dwelling unit / garage at the rear of the zone lot. And then these are just pictures here of the lot. You can see the primary structure at the bottom left. And at the top right is the location, which is an interior lot. Let's see if this works. Okay. So here's the proposed site plan for the new ADU garage. The lot is a large 50-foot wide by 126-foot deep zone lot that backs up to the 5 Points Cultural Historic District along the alley. The new ADU will be located over 90 feet back from the front of the zone lot. And as you can see here, it'll stick out just past the house on one side. And then here you can see the floor plans for the structure. On the left is the second floor plan for the additional dwelling unit. And on the right is the first floor showing the 2-car garage and bike storage. So design guideline 4.19 states to design a new garage or secondary structure to be compatible with and subordinate to the primary structure and the surrounding historic context. So the roof shape of the new garage ADU is a flat roof structure, which is different than the hipped roof primary structure that's on this zone lot. However, the flat roof form is common to the Curtis Park Historic District. And as you can see here, there's several examples in the district showing secondary structures having a different roof form from the primary structure. And these are just some examples the applicants gathered. Okay. And then design guideline 4.20 states to use materials that appear similar in scale, color, texture, and finish to the primary structure and to those seen historically in the district for detached garages and accessory structures. And again, as you can see here, the applicants have gathered a number of photos showing stucco structures within the historic district. Okay, so here are some elevations. At the bottom, you can see the elevation that'll be facing California Street. The new garage ADU structure will have a boxy flat roof form with a 2-car garage on the first floor with that ADU at the second floor. The new structure will take access off the alley like other secondary structures in the district. And as you can see at that bottom elevation, the garage ADU will also have tall, narrow window proportions facing towards the front facade in California Street, which are characteristic of the historic district. However, window proportions at other elevations are more atypical of the district. However, those are going to be much less visible elevations. Next slide. So here are some other elevations as well as showing the materials. So the garage ADU is proposed to be clad in 3-coat stucco at the first floor with a 1-inch transitional aluminum flashing between the first and second floor, and then proposed to have the 6-inch wide vertical nickel gap tongue and groove cedar siding at the second floor that'll stick out about 1 inch past the first floor stucco. That was mainly to keep the water dripping directly onto the stucco below. The primary structure is a painted brick material, and the proposed stucco and wood materials are not similar to what is found on the primary structure, but these are common materials found within the historic district. However, the vertical wood siding is not commonly seen. Staff was split on the appropriateness of the vertical wood siding material, as some thought it was a material that is historically seen, but used in a modern way, making the ADU more of its time. Additionally, though the second floor is proposed to have the vertical wood siding, only about 4 to 8 feet of the upper floor protrudes out to the side past the primary structure and would be visible from California Street. So staff thought that might be a minimal amount that would be visible from the right-of-way. Additionally, staff was also split on the sliding door at the rear deck, which you can see here at the bottom elevation. It is atypical of the district to have a sliding door, but it is at the rear on the alley and will not be highly visible from the public right-of-way. The structure does use only 2 primary materials with a simple metal canopy above the entrance to the ADU, so it is simple in nature. And then here you can see some section throughs of the new structure and in relation to the primary structure at the front of the lot. The height of the garage ADU is approximately 21 feet 8 inches, and the primary structure is at a height of 21 feet 3.5 inches. So the new garage ADU will be slightly taller than the primary structure. However, it's very minimal and will not be perceivable at the street, as the new structure will be set back over 90 feet at the rear of the zone lot, mostly behind the primary structure. Therefore, staff does not feel staff does feel the structure is subordinate to the primary structure. Additionally, two-story garages ADUs are common within Curtis Park. And then finally, here's just some perspectives on the left showing the proposed new structure. At the bottom right, it's just showing how the lot kind of backs up to 5 points where there's going to be a lot of taller buildings and construction proposed. So they just wanted to show kind of the context for the neighborhood. At the bottom right, kind of the center photo, you can see where the ADU would stick out just past the primary structure for this lot. So staff is recommending approval with condition, just that the metal canopy detail and manufacturer specifications should be added to the application packet as they were missing. However, staff overall feels that the new structure is compatible with and subordinate to the primary structure and the surrounding context.
Crystal, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for Crystal? There are no questions for you, Crystal. All right, then we are on to the applicant's presentation. Are any of the applicants here for this one? Okay, great. Yes, yep.
Well, you have the whole thing.
And as we begin, however long you take, let's start with your names and addresses for the records.
Yeah, for Thomas, my name, radio.
Yeah, Thomas Richardson. Same.
Yeah, we didn't really prepare anything, and I'm honestly a little nervous.
That's okay, no worries. I'm nervous too.
Um,
Every time I come here.
Yeah, I've been living in Curtis Park for 4.5 or almost 5 years now. Started off in a house right off of Curtis Park, 31st and Champa, and I'm a walker and a biker, a car driver, so I spend a lot of time walking the streets in the neighborhood and really love it. So we felt super lucky when we found this property at 29th in California to be able to stay in Curtis Park, and you know, we're really like manual people, so we're looking forward to having a garage space, gym, bike storage, pottery, that kinds of stuff. And yeah, we're just with the space that we had, thought that the ADU could make a lot of sense. Like some of this new homeowners in really strange housing market times. So that's kind of the background of building this and where we are. We're very new homeowners. Just in September. But yeah, in terms of the structure itself, I really like the Italian structures that are all throughout Curtis Park. The original house I was in, 3114 Champa, it's Italian, it like this big red beautiful thing. So we were attracted to the shape, and we have come a long way since the first designs with our architect who also lives in Curtis Park on Champa, same block of my old house. We've come a long way working with Crystal. We've been really lucky to work with her. She's been incredibly helpful, and you would not recognize the initial design to this one. So we've made a lot of effort to incorporate staff, what staff has told us, what we've been seeing in the neighborhood, and just thoughtfully pull that all in so we can respect the neighborhood while also making something that's a little bit more modern, because we are young, and I guess that, you know, that's interesting to us as well, to combine the two. Yeah, so we're excited to hear what everyone has to say, and to hopefully get something that we're happy with and that fits with.
Yeah, I think speaking to the modern application of the siding, you see siding all over the neighborhood. So wanting to have a new interpretation of a classic material is something we were going for there. And then that is complemented by what we originally had were horizontal railings on the stairs, horizontal railings on the back deck. And you'll notice that we have switched that to vertical railings. That was in part due to recommendations by staff and the community reviewers. And I think, that's something that complements all three features, sort of speak to the vertical nature of a lot of the structures that you see. The tall homes. We think that sort of echoes that in the material choice and arrangement. So, yeah, that's it.
Great, no, that's terrific. And commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicants? Nick?
I think it's admirable you're proposing solar for the roof of the ADU. Question I have is regarding the angle of those panels. What's shown in the photograph in the application seems to be a pretty low angle, shallow angle, reflecting sort of a property that would be closer to the equator. We are not near the equator, and so therefore I think the angle would be a little bit steeper. And then what that means is instead of the roof being at the same level as the ridge of the existing house roof, the appearance may be that it has more mass than the main house. Have you thought about that? And wonder what impact that may have to the design?
That's a great question. And in terms of solar, especially with the 6-story structure going up on 29th and Welton, we are unsure if that is going to even be a tenable solution for us, since that structure is going to be blocking so much of that early morning sun. Have not thought about that angle at all, but I think that that's something that we're almost wondering if we are going to be revisiting entirely, and we just don't have the possibilities of that. So
Sorry, could you speak up just a little bit?
Yeah.
If you're asked a question again.
yeah, do you want me to see it?
No, it's okay. Just for the
Thank you.
people online.
Anything else? Any other? Okay, great. All right. Have a seat. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Sure. All right. On to public comments. Do we have any comment? Anybody who would like to make a comment here? No? Oh, you would? Oh, yep. Well, you know the routine.
Yep.
Hi, Keith Pryor, 2418 Champa Street, design review chair for the Curtis Park. We did meet with the applicant and have gone over this design. And we are definitely in support of Crystal's recommendation. We feel that it is subordinate to the primary structure, and we do find the flat roof and pitched roof are compatible. We did outline a letter that we did send to the commission with our concerns. Outdoor staircases is not something that we prefer, but the commission has previously approved. The vertical siding is not something that we have supported as a committee in the past. The commission has supported that on an addition that was approved about 4 years ago on Curtis. It is yet to be built. They had proposed vertical siding on that addition, and that was approved by this commission, but the design review committee still stands that we don't find that interpretation of a modern take on the siding as a vertical piece is something that's compatible. But that's up to the commission, and you guys, continue to have that dialogue. And then the other piece that we would like to focus on is that given that it is visible from the primary street, because it does stick out on the side, the Curtis Park Design Review Committee has always been that we match the primary structure material with that on the primary street facing material. So on this, we would like to see brick on that primary structure based on the piece that is facing the street, that is visible from the street. The two sides and the rear obviously could be a different structure or a different material because it is not visible from the street. So, but the mass, the form, the scale, we feel is appropriate. The material is something that we would like you guys place to discuss further. So, thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Anybody else here want to make a? All right, do we have anyone online that is joining us virtually that would like to make a comment? I don't see any hands raised. Nope, okay, all right. Then we'll close the public comment period. Crystal, did Crystal have anything else that you'd like to comment on?
Nope.
Nope, okay, cool. Commissioners, any other questions for Crystal? All right, then let us go ahead and move on into deliberation. Commissioners, what are your thoughts?
I'll start.
Grant?
Yeah, just by saying, I appreciate all the different neighborhood examples. I think we've seen a lot of Curtis Park ADUs and there's such a varied group of architectural styles, right? So that was helpful for the context and I agree with staff's recommendation here.
Thank you, Graham. Anybody else? Don't all talk at one time.
Well, my view is that the ADU meets the intent of the guidelines and substantively. Where it does not, it's so minuscule, I think I'd rather than revise the whole thing, let it stand as is.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree about, yeah, all the matters of massing, window size, all of that. I think it would probably be good of us to discuss the material question since that was brought up by the neighborhood association. I guess, yeah,
what are your thoughts?
looking at the specifics of the guidelines, it does specifically talk about using vertical tongue and groove for small expanses of walls that are not readily visible from public vantage points. I think this is a kind of an edge case of that, where I would say, given how far set back it is from public vantage points, I think that meets the spirit of this requirement.
Nick's nodding his head.
Yeah, oh, I agree with both Graham and Blair
Very good.
and staff.
Anybody else have any thoughts? All right, then do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I will move to approve application 2024-COA-057 for the ADU at 2914 California Street per design guidelines 4.17 through 4.20, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the following condition: that the metal canopy detail and specifications be added to the application materials.
Graham, thank you. Do we hear a second?
Second.
George has seconded. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right, it's unanimously approved. Congratulations.
Hey,
Yeah,
thank
there you go. Yeah. We are on to our next design review project, and that's 2024-COA-059 at 1335-1345 Grant Street in the Civic Center. And Jesse is our staff person. Hi, Jesse. Hey.
Promise I'm not sick, I'm just taking precautions because everyone else is. sick.
It seems like it's a good idea. I'm thinking, yeah, good for you.
All right, so I'm gonna shake my presentation up a little bit. Previously, well, I had gone to a training and they made some recommendations, so I just want to make some shifts to how I present.
Sure.
So let me know how you like it or don't like it.
Okay,
We'll make additional changes.
all right.
So 1345 Grant Street is coming before the commission for phase 1 mass form and contacts review. Today, I'm going to cover a little bit about the historic district and block context, project overview and applicable guidelines, and then staff findings and recommendations. And you'll just do next slide. Brittany.
Yep, control.
Okay. It's lagging. So in the staff brief, we did outline that there are 3 different districts. There's local, national, and there is historic landmark. The commission will only be reviewing the will only be reviewing the local district boundaries. Staff did want to note that those district boundaries all have three varying boundaries. You can see those in the application materials as well as in the staff brief. We cover those more thoroughly there. But just wanted to point out, this is the local district boundary shown here with the proposed site location enlarged on the left of the screen. And we're going to start off here with some block and district context. So staff outlined the block context around the project site features 2 to 4 story buildings. The buildings on the block are a combination of small multifamily residential structures and civic center and religious buildings. The buildings on the block feature both brick and stone cladding, so simple materials. They use classical elements and such as columns and coins, and they have symmetrical 3-bay, 3-part building layouts, base, middle, and cap, and then 3-bay from left to right. And then they also have consistent street setbacks, as you can see here from that site map. And these are all on the immediate block. There are larger buildings that we'll cover later on that are elsewhere in the district. So now we're going to go over the project overview and applicable guidelines. In this section, I'll cover a brief introduction for the project scope, footprints and setbacks, building heights, and then the overall building design. The picture here is a timeline of projects that you have reviewed for this site. Those include May 2nd, 2022, which was denied, July 25th, 2023 proposal that was approved by the commission. The applicants have a new architect and they have made significant revisions to the overall proposal for this site. You reviewed an updated revised proposal on December 19th, 2023. That was denied with some significant deliberation and comments from the commission. And then the applicant has submitted for this meeting with those revisions based off of commission deliberation comments and staff comments as well. And then staff would like to start by mentioning that there are a few discrepancies in the plans between the first floor footprint and the mezzanine footprint. The applicant appears to have included a different footprint than previously what was previously reviewed. And they have a variety of setbacks that don't match the setbacks that are shown on the mezzanine. And you can see that clearly indicated by the orange boxes with the dimensions there, the difference between the first floor and that mezzanine level. The applicant will just need to revise and correct any issues with the drawings in their future submittals. If you'll go back. The first floor of the building will be used as parking, amenity and retail space, as well as lobby leasing with additional parking on P1 and P2 that are not pictured here. Parking will be accessed off the alley, which is typical, and that is to the west of the site. And the amenity retail space and lobby leasing space will be accessed off Grant, which is the east side of the street or the east side of the site. Levels 1 and 1.5 will have a footprint of roughly 140 feet by 120 feet. Go to the next slide. So the building will be set back 5 to 10 feet from the property line at Grant Street, while most of the building base will be set back 10 feet, consistent with 1329 Grant and 2030 East 14th. As indicated by the light blue lines. I apologize, Brittany, if you could go back. As indicated by the light blue lines, you can see here, well, you can't see my mouse, but the light blue lines on the screen The building's main entrance on the south tower before of the Adams at Grant Street. And the First Baptist Church of Denver by 5 feet, matching the previous middle setback. And I'm basing this off the mezzanine footprint I'm assuming the first floor is just, and it's an accident. It wasn't meant to be expressed that way. So staff did originally express concerns with the inconsistent setback at the south tower entrance. However, the commission expressed support of the 5-foot setback on December 19th. The building will have a 3-foot, 3-inch setback along the alley, fitting in with a range of rear setbacks in the immediate area. Staff had previously expressed concerns over the impact of the building's massing on the southeast, southwest, and northwest corners of the building. And the surrounding block context. However, the commission stated that at the December 19th meeting that the massing could work well with more attention to the articulation at the base level, especially. Now you can go to the. Moving on to the upper levels. Levels 2 through 10 will have a footprint of approximately 135 feet, 10 inches by 118 feet, 6 inches. Level 1 and 1.5 will have a rectangular footprint, while levels 2 through 10 will have an L-shaped footprint. The L-shaped footprint will have a 77-foot wide south tower element and a 42-foot wide north tower element, and a 15-foot wide zipper element between the north and south towers. That L-shaped footprint was part of the previous submittal, and the commission and staff both expressed support for that footprint as it provided visual relief to the First Baptist Church. So moving on to building height, the new construction will be approximately 115 feet, 5 inches to the top of the parapet for a total of 10.5 stories. The applicants have defined the base on the south tower as levels 1 to 2 and on the north tower as level 1 to 1.5. The applicants have defined the building middle as levels 3 through 9 on the north tower, or excuse me, on the south tower, and 2 to 9 on the north tower. The applicants have defined the building cap as level 10. So it would be a 1-story cap. There are some discrepancies between the elevation designation of base, middle, and cap as indicated by the light blue circle and lines on the elevations versus what's shown in the 3-dimensional renderings and what staff discussed with the applicant. I've indicated those with the light blue line. So you can see that there's a varied base height from the north and south towers. And then there's a consistent just 1-story, 10th floor cap height. So staff has written their staff brief based on discussions with the applicant on how they're going to articulate the building, base, middle, and cap, as well as the renderings. And then staff did express concern in the previous submittal of a lack of clearly defined base, middle, and cap, and felt that the building divisions were not proportionally, particularly at the base. The commission noted during deliberation at the December 19th meeting that the applicants needed to more clearly define the base, middle, and cap, but felt that the building base was fine at 1.5 stories. The applicants have revised their current design to more clearly show those divisions, and staff are supportive of that proposed division. So the applicant did include in their application materials building mass study. I've also included on this page several perspective images just showing how this building will play with the district. As you can see, this is going to be the tallest building on this block, and it will be the second tallest building on the block for its massing, and the second tallest building at this massing in the district. The other building that is the tallest building is the Ralph L. Carr Colorado Judicial Center. which is a 4 to 12 story massing. Staff would like to note that this is a state owned building and is not under the purview for commission review. And it is also located pretty far away, as indicated by that red arrow in the massing study at the top. So staff included a full list of building heights in the staff brief for your review. I just didn't want to include it in this slide because it's too much to read, and felt that the images did better job of depicting how this will impact the district. While the building height has been reduced by 16 feet from the July 25th approval, and an L-shaped footprint been implemented to provide visual relief for the First Baptist Church, the building will still again be the tallest one on this block. Staff do feel that the applicants have taken steps to provide visual relief, which was a comment that the commission had previously talked quite a bit about, particularly on a block with 2 to 3 story structures in a district with lower scale structures. So the applicant has done what they can to provide visual relief, especially to that individual landmark First Baptist Church to the north of this proposed building site, and to create airspace around different views in this district. So as shown, in the previous district and block context slide at the beginning of the presentation, many of the buildings in this Civic Center Historic District feature strong classical elements, vertical detailing and horizontal banding, symmetrical layouts and regular rhythms and proportions. Many of the buildings in the district also adhere strictly to that 3-part base, middle, and cap and roll of thirds bay layout with prominent central entries. During the review of the December 19, 2023 application, both staff and the commission expressed concerns over the lack of a clear base, middle, and cap delineation on the building. And while the commission and staff are supportive of the L-shaped form, they did express concerns over the window articulation and the recessed zipper element in the previous submittal, especially on that south tower. So the applicants have made revisions based on those comments, and they have submitted a design that draws more from the Art Deco style buildings in this district, like the state Capitol Annex shown in the center and the state services building shown on the right side of the slide. The new design features a streamlined form with clean vertical lines, punched openings, simple details and materials, and a prominent entrance. The applicants have, for the most part, created a clear delineation between the base, middle, and cap of the building, and have also created a more consistent window rhythms, proportions, and layout typically found in this district. Staff will still express concerns over the use of a recessed zipper on the north and south towers, as indicated by the red arrows on the rendering. Staff feel that the zipper interrupts the dividing lines between the base, middle, and cap, and gives an odd asymmetrical appearance to the south and north towers, failing to meet guidelines 4.3, 4.4, 4.8, 4.23, and 4.24. Staff also wanted to point out, as you can see in the renderings, that the windows in the window sizes and the spandrel sizes in that zipper on both the north and south tower are much different than the consistent window sizes elsewhere on the building. And we really feel like that draws the eye to that zipper detail and interrupts the consistent window rhythms that they've created elsewhere on this building. The staff feel that recessed zipper detail should be removed, and a consistent material and window and spandrel sizes be used at the base, middle, and cap. So just keeping that same window sizes across, same material articulation across, so that it doesn't interrupt and blends in. And then they also feel that the recessed zipper material, while it can be addressed in phase 2 design details, the spandrel size and the window size, those will be items that should more than likely be reviewed during phase 1 as they deal with massing. So now we're gonna move on to more specifics of the design, so the base, breaking down the base, middle, and cap. In the next few slides. So most building bases in this district, they feature prominent central entry bays with continuous horizontal banding details delineating the base from the middle and consistent door and window rhythms. Previously, staff had concerns with the building base articulation, particularly the shifts in wall plane, height, and the detailing. During deliberation on the December 19th meeting, submittal, the commission expressed support over that 1.5 story base, stating that they felt that it provided a more human or pedestrian friendly and engaging base level. So the applicant took the commission's deliberation as well as staff's deliberation and reassessed how they were articulating this base height. So they looked at the buildings to the south, the Adams at Grant, and to the building to the north, which is the First Baptist Church. And since they're doing this 2-tower kind of format for their design, they decided to create a 2-story base height that matched or aligned with the 2-story Adams and Grant building to the south. You can see that line indicated, or that height indicated by the light blue line on the slide. And then they kept the 1.5 story height on the north tower entrance area or base area. That aligns with the cornice detail on the transept of the First Baptist Church as indicated by that yellow line. Staff felt that this created more variety in height and it added visual prominence to what the actual entry to the building is. And also helped maintain that overall pedestrian friendly height at the base level to engage the street. So staff did express 2 concerns with the building base. First, staff have concerns with the 1 and 1.5 story bump out to the south side of the building. And that's indicated with the light blue lines on the floor plans and on the elevations. Floor plans show that the first floor of this bump out will house a stairwell and utility spaces, while the mezzanine level will feature a catwalk transfer to an interior stair. Staff feel that the replacement of the bump out creates an odd corner to the south tower base and interrupts the south tower entrance and base articulation, and fails to meet guideline 4.1, 4.23, and 4.24. Staff recommend moving that stairwell from the southeast corner of the building at the first floor to the interior of the building so that it would allow the applicants to push that south bump out further back, roughly 13 feet or more. And that would align with the balconies above as indicated by that red dash line in the lower image. And this would also, in staff's mind, provide more visual relief and kind of get rid of that odd corner being right up close to that primary entrance. And then staff feel that the other issue, as you can see in the north and south elevations, is there is no window or door articulation here. Staff feel that these walls, while they are secondary, will have some visibility, and windows or doors or some type of opening articulation should at least wrap the corners here, and they're citing guidelines 4.8, 4.24, and 4.27. So most buildings in the district, most building middles in the district feature strong vertical lines, clear demarcation between the base, middle, and cap, a relationship to the base, middle, and cap articulation, and punched openings with consistent rhythms and proportions. In the previous middle staff expressed concerns over the lack of consistent middle height banding termination, detail, and window articulation. The commission agreed with the concern and expressed the same during their deliberation. The applicant has revised this application so that the building's middle has a consistent height as indicated by the purple box, somewhat consistent banding detail and window articulation. And a band of square casement windows at level 3 indicated by the red dash box, and a larger spandrel detail indicated by the blue arrows at the level 1.5 and 2 marks the transition from the building base to the building's middle and on the south tower, while the setbacks of floors 2 to 10 marks the transition from the building base to the building middle on that north tower piece. The building's middle will terminate at level 9. Will feature subtle change in spandrel material between the windows to mark the transition from the building's middle to the cap, as indicated by a green arrow at the top. So the subtle change in material relates to more Art Deco style buildings previously shown to you all, and that are found in this district, and staff are supportive of the proposed building middle, except for the south tower and north tower recess zipper element, which we covered previously. So most building caps in the district feature consistent heights and cornice and cap termination details, clear demarcation between the middle and cap, and a relationship to the base and cap articulation. And in many cases, they also include punch openings consistent with rhythms, consistent rhythms and proportions. So previously, staff had expressed concern with a lack of clear delineation between the middle and cap and an inconsistent height for the cap. The commission also agreed with that, stating that they would like to see a more consistent cap height termination detail. So the applicants have revised that based on commission deliberation, so that the cap has a more consistent one-story height that is more proportional to the overall scale of the building. And then the applicant has also added a simple cap detail that will be more clearly expressed during design details phase of the project. Staff would like to note that the window opening inconsistency on level 10 on the northwest corner of the building indicated by the red dash box and lines will need to be addressed more than likely during phase 2. Staff did note that this window size is varied, and it could be because it's at this roof deck level as shown in the floor plan here. Staff's recommendation is just to put a simple glassy rail so that it doesn't interrupt the overall proportion of the opening and remains consistent with the other windows below and to the left of this window opening. But again, those can be addressed, those materials can be addressed in phase 2. However, the opening size will have to be addressed in phase 1. And then in closing, the applicants have, for the most part, addressed the commission's previous comments and concerns. Staff are supportive of the application's clear delineation between the building base, middle, and cap. And staff are also supportive of the application's use of vertical lines, simple detailing, building divisions, allowing the building to relate better with other modern buildings in the district, while still being recognizable as a modern structure itself. Even though staff feels that this application is nearly there, the complexity of the conditions that would have to be put in place would be too much to make a recommendation for approval. So staff is recommending denial. So staff is recommending denial based on 4 main concerns. And that is that there are several discrepancies in the drawing set that need to be corrected. That the bump out on the south side of the building base and the lack of the windows on the second elevations and of the building base, as well as that recessed the zipper element on the north and south towers will need to be addressed, and they're just way too complex to address in clear, simple conditions. So staff is recommending denial based off of guideline 4.1, 4.3, 4.5, 4.8, 4.23, 4.24, and 4.27.
Jesse, thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Jesse? Larry?
Yeah, just clarification on the zipper elements that staff was concerned about. Does that also include the east facade, south tower zipper elements kind of between that middle portion of the entry and the little
Yes,
side
that's
ones? Okay,
that. If we can go back a few slides,
gotcha.
I can show you. I have it marked out here. No, keep going back. Going back. So here, those red lines or the red arrows, those are the two primary zipper locations that we're concerned about. One, because the south tower east facing zipper is on that primary elevation right up at the street and will be highly visible. And then the north tower zipper, it backs up to the individual landmark First Baptist Church and will have visibility behind that church. So those were the ones that we were primarily concerned with and thought that potentially in other secondary elevations of that zipper detail might be less impactful on the district, but felt certainly that these two locations should be addressed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. So this is the fourth time we've seen this application. And 3 of those times have been denials. And I'm a little perplexed about why we're seeing this again as a denial. Because it doesn't, to me, it doesn't seem like this project is making progress. I mean, I know that you say it's almost there, but it's still a denial, and we keep, guess that's my question. Why are we seeing a denial for the 3rd time?
So the applicants did submit a complete application. They did address a lot of the commission's comments from the last review of this project and made, alterations in their current approval. Since it's a complete application, they requested to move forward. We are obligated to bring it forward. And like I said, staff is only recommending denial because we couldn't think of clear, simple conditions that could be put together to recommend approval with conditions. The commission has that flexibility. Staff have to adhere pretty strictly to the guidelines. So, you don't always have to go with staff recommendation. That's your prerogative as a commission of 9. So, that's something that I would recommend, discussing is whether or not you guys have the flexibility to allow for conditional approval. Staff cannot because of the guidelines.
So the commission is the deciding body for all applications. Anything we review administratively is given to us by the authority of the commission as outlined in the design guidelines. So applicants can appeal any application request before the commission. And because we don't charge fees or limit the number of reviews, you may see projects a few times.
Thank you.
The applicants will also add more about timing.
Any other questions for Jesse? All right, Jesse, thank you very much. All right, applicants, it's your turn. You'll have 2 minutes to give your presentation, and at the beginning of the presentation, if you please give your name and your addresses for our records. That would be great.
And I actually need to pull up your presentation,
So just
give me a second.
You want us to do all of our names and addresses or as we speak? Sorry.
It should be
at first, actually. Is that easier?
So the ones that are concerned.
Oh, it's supposed to be while you're speaking, so I'll just shut up.
And then,
And you'll have to let me know when you want the slides changed. I can't give you control with the power or
I would refer to.
PDF presentation.
Guidelines say nothing about security. So,
Ready?
I am ready.
Kate Arano, owner's consultant, 7122 Swadley Court, Arvada, Colorado. And thank you for seeing us again. We have the utmost respect for Jesse and staff, and they've been really helpful for us through this step. And we did come back despite not having a recommendation for approval, strictly due to funding. We can't get funding until we have at least conditional approval, and are currently out of operational funds at this time. I will give it to Phil to hopefully give you some options to lean towards a conditional approval today.
Philip Clausen with Davis Partnership Architects, 2901 Blake Street, Denver, Colorado. Thank you, Landmark staff and commission, for your time and consideration on this project. We're happy to work with you on it. What we see on the screen today, we're back for our fourth round of the phase one review for the mass forming context on this project. On the screen, we see the previous submittal from the previous architect submitted in last summer, then our follow-up design from November of last year. When we presented that to the commission back in November, we received generally positive feedback about the height and the massing of the building and how that had changed, but we had, excuse me, that there's further refinements at the base and the top of the building as well that we needed to address, and then also simplify some of the design. That was something we kept hearing, was simplification and more of an elegant approach to the design. Next slide, please. In the last hearing, the commission and staff noted that the project should not compete or distract from the district, but enhance it, or at worst, be neutral. We heard from staff that the Art Deco buildings in the district may be a more suitable precedent for the project's scale, massing, and may lend to more simplicity to the design. We embrace this approach. Our previous design attempted to wed the massing of multiple different styles in the district. And we feel this new approach is a more straightforward interpretation of some of the other precedents that we find in the district. As you can see here, we have gone with more of an Art Deco inspiration to the overall design. We changed materiality of the design, and we simplified the massing and the fenestration pattern, but the planning is still the same as the previous option. Next slide, please. Previous comments we received from commission staff were specifically related to inconsistencies in the cap, scaling of the base, and articulation of the entry elements. As you can see on the left, the previous design stepped 1 to 2 stories on the cap of the building. The proposed design has a straight datum line defining just level 10 as the cap of the building. And we've stepped the base of the building to more acutely align with the adjacent properties, the apartment to the south, the church to the north. We've created a more central entry feature for the smaller mass, the retail element, which reads as more of a standalone building between the tower and the church. Next slide. This is a similar diagram just shown further down Grant Street. You can more easily see the relationship between the new proposed base lending to the proportions and the height adjacencies of the apartment building. And we're still maintaining that open view to the Capitol from further down Grant Street. The scale and proportions more closely relate to its surroundings. It's more elegant and subtle design. We're not distracting or competing with the district around it. Next slide, please. This is a comparison of the street wall of the previous scheme and the updated proposed design. Very similar to before, with the base of the tower relating better to the scale of the adjacent apartment buildings. You can see that the smaller scale element next to the church reads as more of a singular standalone building. It's a more simple, elegant approach to the design that doesn't compete with its next slide, please. The staff had 3 sticking points in their report, keeping us from a recommendation to proceed to the next phase of the process. We believe all these issues we can address as stipulations or conditions of approval, and it can further be refined in the next phase of design. These next few slides will address the following 3 conditions: the bump out on the south side of the building, the window and fenestration on the non-primary frontages, the north and south interior lot lines, and then the zipper detail on the east and the north facade. So this first slide we see here addresses the bump out on the south side of the building. It's very hard to see in these images, but the two images on the left, there's a red outline on that element that bumps out. This is a stair that goes from the parking garage up to level 1. It also catches the transfer stair from the tower above through the mezzanine to discharge occupants at street level. We agree with staff that this facade could use more transparency and activation. We feel there's a lot of ways we can address that. We could shift the stair back 3 to 5 feet in its current configuration. We could pull it more inbound to the building and let that front facade of the building retreat back to the water entry room, which would be about 10 to 15 feet. We can reconfigure the stair and add in more windows to make it more of an active feature on the front of the building, or we could change the material to help it recess into the background and not be as prominent on the street facade. So we believe there's a lot of ways to mitigate this, working with the staff in the next phase of the design. Next slide, please. Addressing the elevations on the secondary facades, we agree with staff that we could, add more transparency and activation into these facades. We are at a fire separation distance that the IBC will allow 25% openings on these. These would include any louvers, any doors, any windows, those kind of things. We'll be limited to that 25% allowable opening on these facades. Where we can't add in more windows or more transparency, we feel like we can add in artwork, murals, do more interesting masonry details. There's a lot of ways to add more texture and more life to this. Obviously, turning the corners and creating more of that active use at the street level is where we want to focus that energy. Next slide, please. Then the last item we wanted to address was the zipper feature that was brought up by staff. As we planned the building to achieve an economically viable project for the site, we ended up with asymmetry in the plans of the east and the north facade. We felt the tripartite design of the entry translated through the middle of the building up to the cap is an important feature of the district, and we wanted to maintain that. Instead of faking the symmetry of the facade, we chose to express the asymmetry as a void in the facade and create a subtle contemporary detail on the project. It's something that's very apparent on the elevation views, as you can see in these two images. If you switch to the next slide, please. And while it is apparent in elevation, in perspective, the detail is much less prominent. The top two images show perspectives of the most prominent viewpoints of the zipper elements of the district. And the bottom view shows the view from Civic Center Park. As viewed from perspective from the district, the detail is much more subtle than it reads in elevation. While we certainly acquiesce to the commission's opinion to omit the zipper in order to advance the project, the design team feels that this detail creates a richer design with more interest than simply mimicking buildings in the district. This design isn't a one-liner, it's a deeper read, which we feel complements and enhance the district as a whole. If the design doesn't sit right with the commission, you can simply backfill those bays with the same material and fenestation pattern as the adjacent facades. Next slide. In conclusion, we feel the proposed design blends in well with the mass forming context of the historic district, and the design team feels we can address the concerns of the staff report by means laid out in the presentation that we've heard today. As presented, the project will not compete with the district or distract from it, and that we kindly ask that the three concerns raised in the staff report to be addressed by the conditions of approval of the commission if they feel they need to be addressed. Thank you for your time. That's my part. I'm going to turn it over to Jackie for a final closing.
Thank you. I'm Jackie Loftus. I live in Centennial, 7844 East Phillips Circle, 80112. I represent First Baptist Church as the chair of the council. First Baptist is an American Baptist church, which means we are totally independent. We receive neither direction nor funding from any denominational body. Based on the approval of the first design last July, our church council voted to release our endowment funds to use to get to the next stage. We cannot get to the next stage of the project and funding until we get approval for this project, at least conditionally. The church remains committed to preservation and protection of our neighborhood. I hope you can see your way clear to provide us a conditional approval to move forward with this project in this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for our applicants? Yes.
Can we look at a different slide? I don't necessarily have a question, but I'd like to see a slide for a longer period of time, which is the east elevation where you call out the zipper with the red highlights there. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Larry.
Just a question, I guess, I don't necessarily think this is gonna affect our deliberation, but just about the funding. So this is, the funding concern as far as timing is related to funding from, like, internally
From the church.
the church. This is not like a LIHTC kind of. public
Also
funding
the bank
question.
funding as well.
Yeah, we do have some bank funding on the parking lot, which we have used.
Okay. All right, thank you.
If that's all right, I'd like to rebut something you said regarding budget. It wasn't the commission's choice that you withdraw the initial approval
That's correct.
and go back. So it's not really on the process. It's on decisions that were made by you as the applicant.
We are in agreement with the statements made on December 19th that this is a much better design, aesthetically as well as economically, frankly.
Right, but it's not to the city or to
It's
the
not your fault.
commission to compensate you for that by approving under duress. I just thought it important to say that.
Any other questions for applicants? All right, okay, great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so is anyone here anybody here to comment on the project? Make a public comment, 2 minutes? Okay, doesn't look like it. Do we have anyone here virtually that would like to join us and make a comment? Dial *9 on your phone, or your keypad to raise your hand. Landmark. Denver.gov, no, it doesn't look like we have anyone at all. All right, then, Jesse, did you have any other comments, any redirect or anything?
Yeah, so the applicant did cover 3 of the main concerns. I think that one of the smaller concerns is just inconsistencies with the drawings, which could be easily a condition. Some of the other concerns that they pointed out in their presentation, they said that they have a variety of ways that they can address it. That's what makes it too complex for staff to determine a straightforward condition to attach to that. So that's the trouble that we ran into with recommending conditional approval versus denial. We do absolutely feel that this project is something that could reach approvability with some minor tweaks to the secondary elevations at the base and addressing the zipper detail. The commission may disagree with staff and find the zipper detail perfectly fine. But we felt that there are enough issues here that we couldn't quite push it over to a full approval, and the conditions that we would attach would be too complex to push forward with an approval with conditions.
Can I ask a question? So to clarify, Jesse, so for example, with the south bump out, given that there could be different ways to address that, without kind of specific direction from us as to what we would hope to see in a revision to that, it would be difficult to put on you as staff an understanding of what will meet the spirit of what we think could be approved.
Well,
Am I saying that?
yes, I understand what your question is. So the applicants noted in their presentation that they could push it back on like a much smaller amount of footage than what staff was seeing.
Mhm.
I don't know what their other requirements are for footprint and programming, and what zoning regulations that they're coming into play here. So for me to say a straightforward condition would be to set it back 13 feet. That might not jive with all the other things that they have to meet for this project scope. So there's really not a straightforward thing that I can answer without knowing everything top to bottom that's needed for this project, how to like make a very precise condition that is implementable.
I would say some of the proposals the applicant did mention, such as materials and public art, is not within the purview of the commission. So I think it would be of value to provide guidance on those elements now, if you feel that there are appropriate ways to address these things while you're discussing the project, because like public art, you just don't have purview over. Materials you won't review until phase 2. So there could be some unknowns based on how the conversation goes.
Right, and that's a good point that you bring up, Brittany. We had a project in 5 Points that came recently that had no articulation on secondary elevations, and I think even on primary at the base level, and that was quite a point of conversation for how to best address that by the commission during that time. And I would agree, like if they're going to do public art or some type of mural, or if they're going to do a recess opening or if they're actually going to do door and window articulation on these secondary elevations, those are all things to consider. And again, staff couldn't come up with a very direct or clear way to approach that with a commission.
Anything else for Jesse, staff? Doesn't look like it, Jesse, thank you. All right, commissioners, there's a lot to unpack here. We have seen this a couple times. What are there any initial thoughts, and then we can delve into specifics?
I'll jump in and
Grab.
I got to see the first 2 versions. I wasn't here in December to see the revision, so it was exciting to see the revision for the first time, right? Even though we're talking about it for the second time. But I'll agree with the sentiment that I think, you know, given the district and the context and where this has gone, and it feels good to see that. I may be oversimplifying and not trying to complicate for staff, but it seems like what we're talking about here are things that can be solved, you know, hopefully today, maybe today, but pretty reasonably. And so, you know, I think that the 3 primary things that the applicant kind of highlighted in their presentation are written down here as similar bullet points, but see ways that this could be a really nice addition to the district. And it's a unique district with multiple layers. I've seen it in a few places like Spear Boulevard and other things.
Yeah.
It's hard enough to design to one context. And I think this one generally does a really good job of hitting on multiple contexts. So, you know, that being said, it feels like maybe it's worth kind of a point at a time, you know, the zipper that was talked about, the bump out here on the south corner, and then the secondary elevations. I don't know if anybody else has specific thoughts on those, but
I think the 4th thing is that it's not really a complete submission and
Right.
it's inaccurate.
There were discrepancies.
the discrepancies.
So how does staff move forward if we address the first 3 in a condition? How do they police number 4?
The
Well,
4.
it sounds,
I mean, what's being presented? is the
We
question.
get that
indicated-
we get that a lot.
Yeah,
that there
Jesse
are
indicated
inaccuracies and
Yeah.
submittals,
Right.
just for clarity.
I got the impression from Jesse that the discrepancies noticed were not insurmountable, when it came to their,
So what were the
Next review.
specific discrepancies?
So the site plan, the first floor plan versus the mezzanine level, they're showing much more like bump outs and it's closer to the property line. I don't know, Brittany, if you could pull up that one slide that I have showing that first floor and mezzanine level. So those are an example of some discrepancies, and I think it was just an error. They uploaded the wrong or included the wrong site plan, maybe an earlier or later revision. In the packet by accident, easy to fix. And then, yeah, there it is. So you can see here, it's ranging 5 foot, 1'9", 5'5", you know, versus a mezzanine, which is 10 foot and a 5 foot setback, which is what we had consistently seen in the last presentations. That's an easy enough fix. The other one is the demarcation of base, middle, and cap in the elevations. Again, easy enough to fix, and it doesn't really have a bearing on the overall design. And then I'm not sure if this is a discrepancy or if it's intentionally done this way, but the window on the 10th floor on the north tower, north elevation, yes, there. It's shown much smaller, squattier than the windows around it. So it's just unclear. Again, that's something that could be probably easily cleaned up and addressed. Materials wise, you know, staff made the recommendation, and that would be for a glass balcony, that could be handled design details, but the overall proportion and scale of it is something that would need to be addressed in mass form and context. So for the most part, the drawing discrepancies that I ran into are easily resolved. And like Brittany said, we get applications in like that all the time that just need to be cleaned up. And that's easy enough for staff to oversee.
Okay. And we check for those kinds of discrepancies multiple times, because some things do shift in the phase two, so a lot of times that's why we recommend it, because this is a two-step review. We see it a lot in SDPs where things just kind of get pulled over from previous submittals, and because applicants are focusing on this one particular question, they may slightly overlook a page. But we check this project is gonna have so many submittals, we're going to be checking each one of those submittals for all those corrections and that level of detail.
And honestly, I didn't catch that first floor versus mezzanine level discrepancy until I was putting the presentation together and laid them on top to make sure they were scaled correctly and saw, oh, wait, these setbacks are different.
Thank you.
All right, so, yeah.
And also, I think there's a fifth question I think we should address, which is actually the context, the neighborhood context.
Okay.
Because this is a different context than we saw the last time, the Art Deco context. And if you can can you bring up sheet A22, which is part of our scheme?
Let me figure out what sheet this is.
We can show it to you. It's looking north, I would say, looking north on Grant.
I'm just gonna pull up the packet and then go to the actual.
And the reason I say it is because, and this is what's a little bit been sort of difficult about this, is that every time we see the building, it has a different character to it. Aside from all of the things which the applicant says that can be, and I agree, can be addressed. But now we have suddenly an Art Deco building, and the context slide that was shown in this application actually were all for office buildings. They weren't residential. And if you look at this one slide, the applicant slide 822, and you see the large residential building, which is actually south, you would never realize that those are both residential projects in the same that have some relationship to it. In other words, the new one is respecting the old one. This is a whole new, here we go. This is a whole new concept, I think, for what's happening with the building. As I said, the Art Deco examples that were given by the applicant were office buildings. And that's sort of a big change. Okay, so we're going through all of these things that have changed in that. I'd like to be able for us to discuss that as well.
Okay.
I will say that I think as far as like scale and massing, when we've seen previous iterations of this, those same sorts of examples have been brought up because those are the largest buildings within this district. So to me, the context hasn't changed so much in that the size of this, we've kind of known what they've been proposing the whole time. And it's a residential building. And so, and that's been brought up of like, how do we kind of thread that needle of different use, but for a very different size. I think in some ways, I don't know, I don't wanna keep revisiting that because I feel like we've moved past it. And that, I'm not saying we should never, if something becomes problematic, we need to feel free to go back to it. But I am hesitant to kind of keep bringing this up because I feel like we've kind of, for the most part, dealt with it. But I don't know if that addresses your concerns, Dan.
If I could focus on what I like and why this is such a big improvement. And is better for the neighborhood is the Grand Street elevation, so the east elevation. And something that staff said stuck with me and rings true in this design, and that is the sort of three-part facade that's specific or local to this block. And you've got the strong centerpiece and the two supporting wings. And basically, you know, as I sort of squint at the design, what the architect's done is broken down the scale of this into two separate three-part elevations with a hierarchy between the two, one matching more closely to the church and the other matching more closely to the building to the south. I think it's really successful in that way. And quite elegant. The one issue I have is that setback facade to the north, it only having two bays. So I understand that you want them to be an odd number of bays if you're really trying to create that three-part sort of feel. You have 6 bays to the south. You have 4, these are window bays. You have 4 to the north, 2 of which are part of the recessed zipper, and the other 2 that are more pronounced that are above the 3-part elevation at the base, if you follow what I'm saying. So I think it would be more successful if you mirrored the 3-part base to the 3-part elevation in the back instead of just the 2 bays, because those seem very out of place to me, given the context, and that being what the staff already mentioned was sort of the 3-part sort of center part and the 2 wings. I think it would be really successful if that could go to 3 in some way instead of having the zipper be more pronounced with 2 recessed bays. Just a thought, and I don't know if it's a nit from a design perspective, but I do think it would ring more true to the guidelines and the context if that were the case.
Any other general thoughts before we go into the
Yes.
specifics, George?
Yeah. I'm so glad Larry asked the question because I had no clue what a zipper was. I see nothing in the guidelines that refer to zippers. And I don't see any jogs or outline of the building as being odd. To me, it looks like it meets the facade guidelines. It looks attractive. It actually complements the building next door in the present iteration because of the light added on top of the next door building. As to backs of buildings, they're boring anyway. And if it's a parking area, the last thing I want is a window access to where I'm parking my car. So there shouldn't be windows there. I see no arrhythmias in the layout of the massing at all. It looks very pleasant to me, and if there are conditions that my colleagues feel are architecturally and by the guidelines necessary, I will happily support them. I cannot support it tonight.
All right, any other thoughts? Okay, so we've talked about a couple of things. What about, the 3 elements that staff brought out was the bump out. Did anybody have any comments about that?
The bump out on the south.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I was initially agreeing that, yeah, setting that back would be better. But then as I thought about a material change, I could also see that being a satisfactory way to address that as part of the next round, if that say had some sort of darker material and didn't kind of glow in the way that it is currently. So I could also see setting that back, creating just a little spot for detritus to accumulate. So yeah, that's my.
Okay.
Can for some reason, I get confused when,
Yeah.
I don't get confused on the north side, but I get confused as far as that bump out is not actually forward of the building to the south, correct? It is lining up with it? Okay, which I think we kind of see
Mhm.
with this line here. For some reason, sometimes I see it and it looks like it's
know.
forward.
Yeah.
So that helps me.
So I'm hearing y'all might be okay with the bump out the way it is presented to us?
As far as the windows at the base go, I think with the north side, I wouldn't expect to see windows per se in such a tight spot between the building and the church. And I guess I would kind of think of the same as the bump out. And I know that's slightly different than the actual bumping out, but I guess I don't have that big of a problem with it.
Okay, that's fair. That's perfectly all right. All right, any other thoughts before we move on?
And I think
Graham?
to jump onto what Erica was saying, the guideline 4.27. No, yes. Yeah, talking about parking structure, ground floor features that promote a high quality pedestrian environment. You know, the fire easement and the alley, I don't know, if I would consider those primarily pedestrian environments. And I think the way that this corner interacts with the sidewalk, which is definitely the pedestrian environment. I agree with Larry on that, whether it's pushed back a little, but at the risk of accumulating things, or a lot to the point that it basically disappears, which would, be some interior rearranging. Or if it's something different, it's not like we're taking the state annex building and just putting a box on the side. It's a new building and it has program, which isn't our purview, but the way it looks from the outside, which is. But I felt like that, to that end, windows and alleys, and whether it's parking lot ventilation or the 25% transparency requirements. See how that's problematic, but the parking garage we talked about at 5 points a few weeks back was sidewalk facing. Options were either kind of a brick trellis.
It's very different.
Versus translucent storefront, something like that. So it seems like we're looking at a very different scenario here. I've done a lot of work down around the Capitol. I don't know how often folks congregate in that alley or kind of hang out there, short of coming and going for parking. And the parking lot where this building is will not be as busy, at the point with just residents, or different traffic patterns.
So.
And not our purview. So, I see that lack of pedestrian engagement there as a reason that also doesn't feel like a huge component to me.
Okay.
Thank you for tying it to a design guideline.
We can depend upon Graham to do that. for
Yes.
us. All right, so, so it's looking like y'all are okay with the bump out. That's presented. Okay. The lack of windows in the back of the building. It sounds like it's okay.
On the south side,
South side.
but not windows, but necessarily relief.
You've got a lot of mechanical that's shown there
Right.
schematically, and since this is it's a phase 1 version 4.0, but it's still phase 1, and I'm assuming that with, there's a generator room shown there, water entry, mechanical, there's gonna be some level of at least mechanical ventilation, and that's some kind of articulation, whether it's architectural, it'll break up a, 100-foot wall of CMU or something like that. So, whether that's artfully done, mechanically designed, artfully done, I don't know, that we're not designers, but I do think we're seeing a blank slate where the building is gonna require some level of different, system interface that isn't gonna read as just a giant chalkboard.
Yeah, I think my feeling about it is that the guideline specifically talks about a high quality pedestrian environment and as it's really designed as a fire access, I don't necessarily read those facades as being part of the pedestrian environment. So I'm okay with it being blank walls.
At that point, the fire access, the pedestrians just care about getting out.
The State Museum and other buildings right in the adjacent block have similar setbacks, but they also have gates or ironwork that, you
Right,
know, because otherwise, whether it's a bump back or the full 5 feet, you know, it's not a primary access point to the building. Either. So
okay.
I feel good about the lack of pedestrian engagement.
All right,
but
then
justified.
we come to our zippers. George is okay with them? Any thoughts?
I've. Yeah, I was looking, at first they kind of bothered me. But without this, you know, what they're doing is they're trying to deal with the symmetry that Art Deco facades want to have, but that symmetry doesn't work with their floor plan. And, you know, they could alter the floor plan and get back to the symmetry, but as I thought about it, I don't have a problem with the zippers, depending on how they're detailed.
Okay. Well, that's next
And it's sort of understanding what they've done. You know, it's sort of a deconstructive way of looking at Art Deco, taking this facade, kind of slicing a piece and moving it. And so I don't have a problem with the zippers. This building actually has strong contextual relationships to buildings that are further away, state services and the state capital annex building. And you know, whether that context is strong enough, you could argue about, but I understand what they're doing. And I like the fact that the whatever you call the framing of the entry to the north tower versus the framing of the entry to the south tower, that they've now related them to the building on the north and the building on the south better. You know, the whole kind of composition relates to the existing buildings better than any of the previous designs, other than it's too big. But you know, that's not something we can solve.
There,
I
yeah.
mean, that's really what makes this a struggle, is it's such a huge, massive building in a neighborhood that doesn't have anything that compares. So I'm inclined to do conditional approval without knowing exactly what conditions we're talking about. You know, I do think the bump out on the south can be made acceptable with a material change and maybe some detailing. I wouldn't call art or murals part of that solution, even though it's not of our purview. Who's gonna enjoy a mural? Yeah, you know, and I think Graham's right. There's gonna be some openings in that wall that we don't see right now. And they'll have to be protected, but that's an architectural problem, protected from a fire standpoint.
Okay, so anybody else want to talk about the zippers?
I'll just say that I agree with Gary. I think at the earlier design, when we saw those zippers, we had these alternating windows. And that was very distracting, and I felt, and this is not that. And in some ways, because the windows are larger than the other openings that we see, they're almost like glass connectors, which I'm not saying I would want to see, but I think it kind of achieves a little bit of that as well. And so I don't take issue with the zippers. I don't think they're distracting from the overall symmetry. They do make it slightly asymmetrical, but I think overall it still works.
Okay.
So just moving forward, I would agree with Gary that I think we could do some sort of conditional approval.
Okay, so When you say what, so what kind of conditional approval, you mentioned the bump outs, materiality. so-
Well, and I don't know if that, since it's been discussed, and we're not dealing with materials, we're dealing with mass, I don't know if that's a condition that has to be expressed in writing. It is something that we've talked about, and in the next phase, submittal, they can address it. I'm not sure what conditions,
Drawing corrections.
drawing corrections certainly, yes.
Drawing
I
The other one.
mean, I found that a little kind of hard to kind of figure out just where is the top of the building. The renderings show it much more clearly than the elevation drawings.
Graham, you had another,
The other question I had with respect to condition, Nick mentioning that, three-part upper elevations of the north tower, whether that's a sticking point or because I agree, it feels like we've moved away from conditions other than maybe the drawing consistencies or inconsistencies I wrote down were the base middle cap, setbacks, the roof deck detailing. And I think if we're okay with the bump as a mass and form, that I agree with Gary, the material would be where we see that
right,
resolved. So 3 very specific drawing inconsistencies. But we've okayed the zipper. Conceptually okay with the bump, I think, in that non-pedestrian alley elevations. The only thing that we didn't really resolve, and Nick, you made the comment on the front, and again, we've got a big group here today, but that was just one thing we gotta come back around.
Yeah, well, and I'm just one. And I don't know if I feel so strongly about it that it needs to be a condition. I just think it should be something that should be considered.
the friendly
I think
amendment.
what's really important and what they got right was the base.
Yeah.
And, the fact that it's set back and it kind of mirrors the return elevation, and that's 2 bays as well. So I can see, why they did it and maybe it's not gonna have the impact that it does in the elevations in person. It won't have that same impact. But I'm just one of them,
But as a friendly comment.
yes.
Well, I'm looking at that, I is trying to imagine what it would look like if you made that 3 bays rather than 2. And I see what they've done is going to be more successful than what I can imagine making it 3 bays because of how it relates to the rest of the facade.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree, but I understand your.
Brittany, were you just clearing your throat?
That's a big condition. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I
Right,
wanted to.
but that's not. as
Well, and
very-
like I said,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're, so,
Yeah.
but I felt like it was worth revisiting. That seemed to be came with
Worth
pretty good
discussing,
con-
but I don't know if I'd make that a condition, because that's a big
That's a big
condition.
design.
Well, I'm ready to try motion if folks would like.
Graham,
Unless
Larry.
has
Can I
anything else to say.
backtrack to,
Sure, of course.
because I feel like we kind of discussed the zipper, but I'm not sure I got a sense that there was consensus on that.
Oh.
So I guess I'm inclined to agree more with the staff take on it, that the zipper is. I don't think that it necessarily helps, and my biggest concern regarding it is that it has these windows that are a little bit bigger than the others, but they're not different enough to really, to my mind, give a good reason for this. I understand the architect's idea of kind of trying to maintain the conceptual concept of the symmetry by shifting it, but I also just don't know if it would be a problem, given the Art Deco references, if it did have, 1 bay of windows to the left side of the center volume and then 2 bays to the right side. It feels like it's almost drawing more attention to the asymmetry by virtue of having this material change. And I think it could just feel more natural and less visually complex. I think it'd be more subordinate to the context if it were just that little bit simpler.
So possibly being okay with the zipper, but reconsidering calling it out with a different material. Is that what you're?
I just think that there doesn't need to necessarily be a zipper. I think it's just another set of, I think they refer to backfilling those
I see,
bays
yeah.
with the same materiality. I think that would be a more successful and contextually appropriate approach, but I also am curious if others agree or if I'm the only person who feels that way.
Well, I think your comment's interesting, because it almost, you know, Gary, you mentioned the more you look at it, the more they go away.
Yeah.
And Larry, you mentioned, you know, the asymmetry, which you don't necessarily read right off of, that really balanced three-part entry with one bay to the south and the bump out notwithstanding, but then that zipper and the bay to the north, I almost look at it and think, oh, that's a symmetrical facade, like it, my brain doesn't read that zipper in the same way it
Right.
reads the, I'm curious, I guess, the opposite of, you know, if you did infill that and all of a sudden you had twice as much white cladding on the north side of that entry, does that asymmetry throw you more than the lack of the consistent materiality? And I'm just asking the question. You've got the, you know, whether 2 or 3 very symmetrical tower above on the north side. And maybe that, you know, just playing the devil's advocate, I
Well,
guess.
I don't know that there's a guideline that can
Yeah.
tell us
That's exactly.
whether the
what-
zipper is a good thing or not.
That's
I
exactly
think it's,
what I'm
I think
thinking.
it's a design choice. You know, I don't think we can say that, you know, if we don't like the zipper, you know, I could actually see it either way. You know, if it was a asymmetrical facade, I think it still works. But I don't know that there's a design guideline that says the zipper is the right way to do it or the wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
So it's really
4.5.
just, it's a choice.
Choice, yeah. 4.5 does say to design a new building to be recognized as current construction.
Well.
He definitely didn't put zippers in the 50s, right? I mean, based on the context that
Yeah.
we're seeing.
Mhm.
And the building that does show the context of the zippers and parking garage for the judicial complex, I think, great, which is a very contemporary building.
And the fact that, you know, if you don't have the zipper, that they got the symmetry wrong, that's very contemporary.
That's fair too.
That's kind of what I thought is.
Great.
Does feel contemporary, still with a little asymmetry. Yeah, I think that I like your point that it's not really a guideline question, and I can agree with that interpretation.
I think too, the detailing, you know, like I said, phase 2 here, that's
Yeah.
bright metallic anodized gold, like the state annex building versus something more subtle, you know, maybe not a black hole, but not up and out at you either. Be interesting to see what.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
So each one anodized gold.
I love that building. Yeah, we're not supposed to choose favorite. Context.
That's too much in
Building.
design.
I like a lot.
Graham, you're interested in giving a shot at a motion?
I'm gonna try motion with one condition.
Okay.
See what everybody. We talked about, I guess, all these guidelines that are listed, sort of the pros and cons. I'm just gonna keep the guidelines, but I think we can argue for,
Yeah, I think that.
and as opposed to reconstructing the motion. So Madam Chair, I move to approve application 2024-COA 059 for the phase 1 mass form and context at 1335 and 1345 Grant Street per design guidelines 4.1, 4.3, 4.5, 4.8, 4.23, 4.24, 4.27, character defining features for the Civic Center Historic District, presented testimony, submitted documentation, and information provided in the staff report with the condition that drawing consistencies be corrected for phase 2, including definition of the base, middle, and cap of the building in elevation, proper setbacks on the east elevation, and detailing of the roof deck window for consistency with the rest of the window patterns.
Thank you, Graham. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? All right. It has been approved. Thank you very much, Graham. Thank you. Good luck with your project. We'll see you again. All right, that ends our design review project portion of the day. It's almost 3 o'clock. Would anybody like to take a short break before we get into our discussion items?
I just want to note, unfortunately, I have to leave at 3. Thought maybe we would be able to wrap up.
I thought
have
so
to
too.
announce that, but
That's okay. Do you want to hear it? Shall we go ahead?
it doesn't
with
matter,
discussion items?
whatever, yeah, whatever. It's best.
Depends how long they're gonna take, right?
Yeah, exactly. Let's take a 5-minute break. For all of you joining us virtually, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We will be back shortly. Okay. Are we recording? We're recording now? Okay, all right, we're back and meeting's back in session and it looks like we have discussion items. We'll discuss the discussion item process. The chair will announce a discussion item for the agenda. Staff will introduce the informational item. The commission will discuss amongst themselves and with staff, and no actions or votes will be taken for these discussion items. So our first item of discussion is the 2024 landmark year in review, and it's Jen Capetto, who I understand is at home, so she's not feeling well.
Yes. And
Oh my
I,
gosh, listen to your voice.
hello. Yes, I actually sound a ton better than I have all day.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not sharing my germs with you all, just like Crystal did not. So thank you, Crystal, for staying home as well. I went to the preservation conference and promptly got very sick. So shocker. Anyway, wanted to share this year in review with you. I like to do this every year around this time. And I don't actually know if I can move the slides. I can't. So go ahead. Oh, I can. Cool. Got it. All right. Oop, too far. Shocker. Okay. So last year, we ended with 59 historic districts and 362 individual landmarks. So that meant an addition of 5 individual landmarks, including the church at 38th, and I think that's 1618 East 38th Avenue. The Mutra house that Anne lives in. So thank you, Anne. The Allen Gas house on Harrison Lane, and then 1741 Gaylord Street, as well as the Irving Andrews house on York Street. We also added the La Raza Park Historic Cultural District. Come on. Sorry. You think I've never done this before. So we had a lot of planning and regulatory projects. Our big one, big 2 of them we did last year. We're kicking off the American Indian and Indigenous Peoples Historic Context Project, which kicked off in January. We also staffed the table at the Denver March Powwow in March, and we hosted several members of the American Indian and Indigenous Peoples communities whose ancestral home is Denver. We invited them to Denver to have a travel collaborative weekend, which was fantastic in October. We also were working heavily on the design guideline update for phase 2. And talk a little bit more about that later. We have been working on phase 5 of Discover Denver building survey, citywide building survey. We had staff who were subject matter experts for a couple of plans, including the near southeast and the near northwest plans. Both of them have been completed. One of them was just completed early this year, so can't really count that yet, but we did. And then we've been working on our inclusivity of existing designations projects, trying to figure out what properties, what stories are missing in some of the designations that we have, and trying to tell a fuller story, more inclusive story. And then finally, the Spear Boulevard Cherry Creek study that has been going on for a couple of years, we were integrally involved with that. And I know that there was a discussion item that you all heard about that a couple months ago. So in terms of project review numbers that we had a total of 1,523 design review applications. Most of those were administrative reviews or quick reviews. You all had 202 that were cataloged as being commission reviews, but I don't think you reviewed all of them. They may have been ones that likely will go to the commission, but never got that far. So over the course of 5 years, that number is down. We, excuse me, we had a slowdown a little bit in 2022 and then again in 2023. I kind of chalk that up to interest rates being very high and people with the permitting taking a little bit longer last year that we had fewer applications. It's not that the landmark team was taking longer, it's more that overall collectively we in CPD were taking a little bit longer. So, sorry? Oh, cool. If you have anything, just interrupt, feel free. The LPC. So I don't know why it's in gray, but it is. I like to do a catalog of all of the decisions you all made versus the staff recommendations, and Brittany put this together for us this year. So we want to make sure that staff is tracking fairly closely to what your recommendation or what your decisions are, so that we can make sure we're advising our applicants as closely as possible. We were fairly close to each other in terms of recommendations and decisions last year. You all had 26 meetings. You reviewed 200 projects. So again, very close to that 202 number. Kelly stepped down. She was term limited, and Nick joined the commission. So thank you, Nick. Welcome. In terms of the LDDRC, they tracked almost identically. They had very few projects, 29 projects and 10 meetings. Jane Chrysler and Mike Coughlin stepped down from the LDDRC because of term limits, and then Amy Sanborn and Craig Lawrence joined last year. So I'm glad to have them on the commission. Demo and certificate of demolition eligibility applications. We usually review a lot of these each year. Our numbers were down quite a bit. So usually we have over twice that number for CDE applications and nearly twice that for demo applications. So 402 total. You can see over the 5-year period, the numbers were down substantially last year. We approved, let's see, we had 2.3% of the applications we posted notice because they had potential to be landmarks. So that means that the 97.7% of the applications were approved within 10 business days because they did not have potential to be a landmark. Again, I chalk this number up to the high interest rates. So I think that's really what has stalled the demolition projects this year. Tax credits were basically comparable to previous years. We had an anomaly year in 2022, and I think that's probably because so many people were doing work during the pandemic or right afterwards, and then this year kind of was more a little bit normal. So just over $80,000 of tax credits that you all approved in 2023, which is just under $400,000 worth of rehab costs, which goes back into the economy. Let's see, so here's the numbers for, you can see last year was or 2 years ago was this really anomalous year of very high application numbers, but we were pretty comparable to previous years for 2023. So we don't do all this work based on taxpayer money. We do a lot of work based on some grant funding and project funding. So wanted to honor the funding sources that we received last year because we were really grateful for those. So the Historic Context Project got funding from the National Park Service, the Underrepresented Communities Grants Program, also the Peter Grant Fund for Colorado for the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We also got money from the Rose Community Foundation, and then Community Planning Development and Denver Mountain Parks contributed money as well. And then CPD and contributed to the inclusivity and designations, as well as Discover Denver. And we got a substantial grant from the History Colorado from State Historical Fund for the Discover Denver grant survey project. Community engagement efforts. We're always trying to get out in the community more, so wanted to highlight some of the areas that we did here. So for the Context Project, we were at the March Powwow. We were also at Eduporium, IACON, Friendship Powwow, and had this tribal collaborative weekend where we invited tribal nations to come visit us and have conversations about the importance of Denver to these communities. But we also presented to several of the preservation community members as well in different opportunities. So the Colorado Preservation Conference, we had some sessions there. Also the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, we did some webinars and participated in the summer short course that was online. We've presented to Docomomo, Colorado, Savannah College of Art and Design, and the University of Colorado, Denver graduate programs. many of our members are members of professional organizations, but Abby is now the chair of the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. So I wanted to honor that. It's exciting. Yeah. Crystal's a member of the Public Art Committee for Denver, which is also very exciting to have her as part of that. I'm a member of Rocky Mountain chapter for APT, which is an honor, but not as nearly exciting as those two. A couple of administrative projects that we've done, we did last year. So the design review application checklist, Brittany worked massively hard on that, and a lot of team members reviewed and provided feedback there, and it's done. And we're so glad it's working very well. So great job there. That led to the application checklist for neglected and derelict buildings that are landmark properties. So that has also been adopted, which is fantastic. We're glad for that. We expanded what qualifies for a quick review. And so we've had a lot more quick reviews, and they're going through, projects are going through faster, which is exactly what it was there for. We developed a welcome postcard, which is the part at the bottom right, saying congratulations on your recent purchase of a historic property. We've not mailed these out yet, but we are planning to send them out to property owners that are new property owners based on assessor records in historic districts and individual landmarks, just to introduce ourselves and tell them, don't forget you need to landmark review. Hopefully it'll cut down on some violations that we get. But also we have a tax credit postcard that we want to send out to targeted historic districts to remind people about the process. And then we've been working on our designation customer guide, which should be done this year, which is great. We're digging through our old files and sending them over to Western History Collection. We did the first batch last year, and hopefully we'll get the last batch done this year. So almost done there. And I'm really almost done. So hiring. We did a lot of hiring in 2023, had a lot of awesome people join the team and get promoted. So Abby was promoted to principal planner, and Brittany was promoted to principal planner, and Matt Huda, who was our inspector at the time, was promoted to associate planner. So those were really great promotions on our team and have worked out very well. We also hired a few new people. So Kathy Corbett, who was often hired by us as a consultant, ended up being hired as a part-time senior planner who's on call so that we can use her for various research projects. Lauren Gleason, I don't have a photo of her, but Lauren was hired as the zoning and ZNIS, Zoning Neighborhood Inspections Services landmark inspector, and she's been doing a phenomenal job there. Andrew Abbey on the bottom right was hired as the staff planner, and Kira Trundle was hired as the American Indian and Indigenous Peoples Context intern, and she's at the bottom left. Yeah, so what are we doing this year? What's on tap? So we are finalizing the organizational structure. I mentioned last year at this time that we were kind of shifting things around a little bit to have 2 supervisors under me, and then some principal planners and staff kind of shift around a little bit more structure. And we're finalizing that with, now that Amy has joined the landmark team as the design review supervisor, our structure should be a little bit more complete, which is great. We're continuing the American Indian and Indigenous Peoples Historic Context. That should end in summer of 2025, we think. Phase 2 of the design guideline update is on track to finish this year, so that's great. Hopefully that will come to you all and be adopted this year. And then we have a bunch of interesting designations. There's always interesting what people come to us to recommend designations for, and so you'll see a bunch of those this year, we think. And we're always trying to expand our outreach and engagement efforts. So that is a summary of last year and then a little bit about this year. That's all I've got.
Jen, thanks. So what do you do in your spare time?
Well, let's see. I go to preservation conferences and get sick.
Commissioners, do you have any comments? Anything you want to ask Jen?
Do we have postcard for congratulations, you bought a historic home not in a district, but it's still.
Yeah.
We had that a couple times. Sorry. In all seriousness, that's a hard thing to cover, I know. I get asked that all the time about like that one thing falls through the cracks, right? I think the postcards are really cool idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Because a lot of neighbors and a lot of folks
Mhm.
don't know.
Yeah.
Start, so.
Yeah. And we, one of the things we would like to do this year as well that I didn't put on the list is to really work with the residential plan review team to make sure that any demolitions that are proposed based on plan review, that those get flagged as not necessarily like, hey, this is a potential for a landmark, but they get flagged to the owner very early in the process so that they know that this is an issue, or that not that this is an issue, that demolition is a thing that we have to do, and explain what that process is.
Cool. Any other comments for Jen? Well, congratulations, Jen, and to the whole staff. I mean, you guys are amazing. I'm
Spectacular stuff.
gobsmacked by you every time I think about it. Thanks very much, Jen, and I hope you feel better. Yeah,
Thank
feel
you.
better.
Not there. See you sometime soon.
Eventually, summer will be here again. Okay, all right, Jen, thank you. All right, our next discussion item is Windows Design Guideline Update, and that is Brittany and Abigail. And congratulations, Abby.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, are we set up to go? If you turn your camera on, then I can share. Okay. I can't share with you until you turn the camera on. It's special like that.
So I'm gonna kick off talking about some of our research that we did leading up to this planning the guideline update, and then because I was in charge of the research, and then I'll turn it over to Brittany, who's been leading our guideline update program to talk about kind of where it's going next. Okay, so we started out this guideline update for Windows with really wanting to look at what other cities were doing. So this is similar to the process that we used with the first phase of the guideline update when we were looking at solar. So just again, we wanted to kind of get a big picture. So here's the kind of look at other communities we looked at. So those were chosen by cities of similar size, cities with strong preservation programs, and cities that had, up-to-date window guidelines to look at. Looking to see if there we go. So we had some big questions that we were asking, particularly we wanted to see what other cities were doing as far as window replacements, what they did when they allowed window replacements, what the requirements were, and did they review condition, what were their requirements on what was allowed as a replacement then as well. So we found, looking at these other cities, that the majority did say in their guidelines that a window had to be too deteriorated to replace, following Secretary of the Interior standards, but they didn't all require assessments. So we found that there were 8 that said that a window had to be determined as too deteriorated to repair, or that really required some sort of assessment to replace. Others said, there were 6 that said that they, a window should be too deteriorated to repair, but didn't really review that. They didn't have any, kind of definition or description of what too deteriorated was. We found that there were 3 that only required assessment for certain windows or locations. So really depending on the significance of the window or the visibility of the location. And then we found that there were 3 of these commissions that just didn't review condition at all as part of their replacement request. So an example of one that really kind of provided a definition to kind of outline what was repairable or not was San Antonio. So they kind of had a definition of these are things that are repairable, and then they said that windows would be considered beyond repair. missing components or units, extreme wood rot, or 50% or more of a window's components needed to be reconstructed. So like, instead of doing the assessment like we do, this was there, they had to show that, it fell in that window beyond repair category, and then they would be allowed to do replacement. So we also then wanted to see what other cities said about visibility. How much do they consider visibility when they're deciding what's replaceable or what isn't? How much do they have, do they have different guidelines for highly visible windows versus guidelines for windows that aren't as visible? And so we found that the majority, or 12, had guidelines that specifically addressed visibility. So allowing more flexibility for windows that aren't visible and having stricter guidelines for windows that are visible. And then we found that 8 of the communities just had, across the board guidelines for replacing historic windows and didn't consider visibility. So here's some of what we found kind of about, different ways that cities considered visibility. Austin, Boulder, and Charlotte all had something we thought was interesting. They encouraged moving historic windows from the back of a building to the front. If you had historic built windows elsewhere on the property and you needed to replace your front windows, they encouraged kind of moving windows in order to be able to have historic windows on the front. Albuquerque, Charlotte, LA, New Orleans, New York City, Salt Lake, and DC all provide flexibility on rear or secondary elevations. So you're more likely to be able to get approval to replace windows on those secondary elevations. Then Albuquerque, Fort Collins, Salt Lake, and LA all provide material flexibility on rear or secondary elevations. So you can use materials on, you don't have to use the same material throughout the building. You could have wood windows on the front and allow a different material on rear or secondary. And then New Orleans and New York really base their whether or not it's commission review is depending on how visible it is. We then also wanted to consider, did cities have different guidelines depending on the significance of the window? So that's something we also often think about in Denver, as we're often thinking about, do we have, something that's an individual landmark? Do we review that something that, differently than something that's just a contributing building? So we found here that was pretty much split. So half of the cities we looked at consider significance when they're determining the significance of the building or the window when they're determining what can be replaced. And about half of them, it's more across the board general guidelines. They don't get into things like considering significance. So you can see here, Albuquerque, Baltimore, Boulder, Charlotte, El Paso, New York, and Salt Lake all review windows.
Significant window.
Based on how, is it a character defining window? So they base it on the significance of the window. If it's a significant window, that's going to determine whether or not it can be replaced. Austin, New Orleans, and DC also base review on the building's significance. So if the building is significant, that's going to determine what can be replaced or not. So this just kind of gives some examples of various approaches different cities take. You can see the one on the left is Boulder. So they're looking at, is it a very historically important building, historically important, or non-historic, so it would be our non-contributing. And then, based on that, depending what can be repaired or replaced. New Orleans on the right really looks at whether or not it's a significant individual building, contributing or non-contributing, and that determines whether or not something can be staff or commission review. And one of the things we were really interested in as we looked at these different cities was the concept of character windows. So this is something we found in several of the guidelines we looked at, where they had particular guidelines for what they considered character windows, and character windows needed to be repaired whenever possible, but they give additional flexibility to kind of more typical, not as unique windows. So the common window types can be replaced more easily, but they require kind of stricter standards for character windows.
So one of those that describes character windows, or Baltimore calls them special windows. So for Baltimore, they define these as windows that are custom designed or crafted, have a high degree of styling. So some of the examples they give are stained glass windows, windows with curved glass, arch windows, or windows of unusual configuration are defined as being special windows. New York City also has this idea of special windows. So for New York, they define special windows that need to be protected as having a rare shape, distinctive pattern, distinctive glazing, being an example of fine craftsmanship, having distinctive materials, having a really unique typology, or being particularly old. Salt Lake City also uses this idea. They call them either ornamental or specialty windows. For them, they define them as windows with unusual shapes, such as being circular, having a distinctive glazing pattern, such as diamond paned or multi-paned, are being associated, being distinctively with a particular building style. So example, if you had a prairie style building with distinctive prairie style windows. And then finally, Washington DC also uses this idea of special windows. So for them, they define them as buildings that have distinctive architectural elements that are custom designed. So basically windows that you couldn't find typically in just a manufacturer's catalog. And they consider these to be things like arch frame, transoms or side lights, unusual configurations, multi-pane configurations, curved glass, stained glass, carved sashes, or projecting bays or oriels. We did also look some at what other cities were requiring as far as materials. We were particularly interested in seeing, just across the board, not just window replacements, but anywhere in historic districts, did other cities allow vinyl windows? Since that's something that we've taken a hard stand on in Denver, that we don't allow vinyl at all in historic districts. This is something we were curious what other cities were doing. So we found that 6 cities specifically state in their guidelines they don't allow vinyl. 9 don't address it one way or the other. 2 allowed vinyl in some locations, and 3, it was kind of a case by case, the commission might allow it.
That's the question.
Mhm.
Did it have anything to do with the region at all?
Yeah. It may, I don't know that it did as much some of the regions that we were looking at, but like I know some people who are planners in Florida, like Florida definitely allows a lot of it because they're more concerned with like what meets the hurricane and some of the other standards than they are like that's their highest thing is like meeting, what products meet hurricane standards, and they allow some flexibility otherwise. But other than that, I think it's pretty mixed regionally. So we then did various community outreach as part of this. We wanted to see what the community thought about window guideline update. So we started out with some community meetings. We had 2 meetings on Zoom and then also had an in-person meeting. And then we also did a survey that Brittany's going to talk about. So at our community meetings, we started out, we gave a lot of the background that I just gave you, talking about what our research said. And then we also asked a series of questions of attendees to kind of get their feedback on some of the things we're thinking about. So for example, asking, should the Landmark Commission define what it means for a window to be deteriorated? Such as that example I showed from San Antonio. And we had the majority said, yes, it should clearly be defined, but some others said either, no, it should just be case by case, and others said the commission should not review condition at all. Asking, so should we have different guidelines for replacement of special windows versus common window types? And we got a strong yes for that. And that was across all of our meetings. We got strong public support for this idea of having special windows that should really be protected, but allowing more flexibility for common window types. And then at all of these, we also just provided an opportunity for people to give, feedback generally. So a lot of things that address
efficiency, address cost, and really address also wanting the process to not be as cumbersome, to have it be an easier process. Okay, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Brittany.
Oh, sorry. So we did have our survey posted from September 6th to the end of 2023. I think we closed it like 2 days before, but we did have 281 respondents, and we had an English and Spanish version of the survey. So we kicked off with the survey with, do you live in a Denver Historic District or an individual landmark? And you can see that an overwhelming majority of respondents to our survey do in fact live in either a historic district or a Denver landmark structure. I don't have every single question that we had in the survey here in this slideshow presentation, but if you did answer yes, we did ask you where you lived and if you've considered replacing your windows. So you can see that 80% of the people who answered yes, that they do live in a historic district or an individual landmark structure, have considered replacing their windows. So then we asked people why they considered replacing their windows, and we had some pretty standard answers, but we also had an other option. But the top 5 answers to this question were windows are drafty or leaking, and that is around about 90% of the respondents. Windows are deteriorated beyond repair, and that was over 70% of respondents. Increase ease of operation, about 65% of respondents. Maintenance concerns, a little over 60%, and then sustainability concerns, which was a little over 50%. So those were the top 5 reasons people have considered replacing their windows. So then we did ask if windows should be allowed regardless of their condition to be replaced, as long as they closely match the historic windows. And you can see that over 80% of our survey respondents did say yes to that question. So amongst the public, there is a really strong and great desire to be able to replace windows regardless of the condition and not have to prove that windows are deteriorated beyond repair. We did ask if windows should be reviewed differently based on the visibility of the window from the street. And again, the community did indicate that 60% of the respondents would like there to be different reviews based on visibility from the street. So again, generally what our survey results are showing us is that applicants would like more flexibility in the window process and it to not be as cumbersome as Abby indicated in the community meetings results. So I found this question the most interesting. We asked what features should be matched when replacing windows, and materials was very low on the list. Size and proportions was more important. Trim was more important to the community respondents. Depth of the window and the wall plane was more important. Light patterns ranked above materiality. And then finally, we do have materiality, and then operation of the window is kind of the last concern there. So material is very low on the community's scale in terms of what they're looking at when they want window replacements. So then we asked, because we have heard several times that our guidelines don't explicitly state that you are not allowed to use vinyl. We do have some guidance that when windows are original historic, they should be aluminum clad or wood windows. And then we have some guidance if you are missing all your windows, you or your new construction, you may be allowed to use fiberglass composite. But again, we don't specifically state in our guidelines that vinyl is prohibited. So we asked if materials should be specifically stated, and a fair number of respondents felt that there should be flexibility based on case-by-case situations. But also there was a fair number of respondents that felt that the guidelines should specifically state what materials are allowed. So about 50% wanted flexibility and about 30% wanted it clearly stated. But about a little under 20% said it should not be clearly stated. So this was kind of the most evenly split question response in the survey. So then we asked if a building retains its historic wood windows, which replacement window materials do you think are appropriate? Wood overwhelmingly won out in this situation, followed closely by aluminum clad wood, which are the two materials we currently allow. Fiberglass composite came in third. This is not a material we currently allow for the replacement of historic windows. But a little over 60% would like us to consider fiberglass composite. Vinyl did stay pretty low on the rating scale, a little over 30%, but there was still a large percentage of respondents who would like us to consider vinyl for wood windows. So then we did ask if there should be different guidelines for replacement of character windows. And we had a question that this was the question, and then we had another question that had a bunch of window examples from Denver and asked the community to identify which windows they felt were character windows. And then again, just like the community meetings where we asked about special windows, again, there's an overwhelming desire to create these special windows differently than just your standard everyday window. And then sorry, my slides got a little mixed up here. But we did ask if you have historic steel windows, which material do you think is appropriate? And again, steel is the most popular answer, followed closely by aluminum and then aluminum clad wood. And then fiberglass composite actually won out over wood for these replacement windows, with vinyl ranking very low on the scale. So I took a lot of the comments that we were seeing, and this the first comment is really troubling to me, because I think sometimes we do hear this a lot, is that people regret advocating for historic districts. And a lot of times it does come down to how we review windows, and that alone is very troubling to me. That issue is kind of stopping people from wanting to become a historic district or regretting advocating for historic districts. People did want us to loosen restrictions on single and 1 to 2 family homes. There should be more flexibility in historic districts. That's something we were hearing across the board. People want us to consider how expensive materials are and how they can be difficult to access. People also, were stating that stained glass should be preserved, but other windows could be replaced with whatever is needed. Again, looking at something in a case-by-case basis, but not focusing so much on the materials of the windows. Flexibility for rear facades, but flexibility again should not include a change in size or configuration of the window. Again, nothing about the specific materials. Lots of comments about it should be a simpler and more streamlined process. And that we should make this, easier on the homeowners, and that the street view is more important than other facades. So that's generally what people were saying in the survey. So because of this, we've decided staff to focus on character windows. And we wanted to get a sense of what the community thought character windows were. So overwhelmingly, the community did vote stained glass as character windows. You can see that ranges from 90 to 80% votes. We did also see that cottage style windows with unique mullion patterns or leaded glass glazing were voted as character windows, but cottage windows that have simpler divided lights weren't necessarily considered a character window, and I do have a example of that later in the survey. And then windows with arches or unique mullion patterns were also considered character windows. So this is the in the survey, the window selection that got the most votes for character windows. Here's kind of the second tier of votes. Again, windows that have arch configurations, diamond pane glazing, windows that have more than just one or two divided lights were generally voted to be character windows. But again, here's that cottage window where this just has a simpler light configuration than what you saw on the previous page, where these were really unique mullion patterns. This is a very simple mullion pattern. It was not voted as high as a character window, less than 50%. Again, this is just a 1/1 window, but it is arched. So I think the arch configuration bumped it up a little higher in the voting scale, because on the next slide, we have 1/1 windows that have transoms above, but they were voted pretty low on the scale. Again, another cottage style window with divided lights. We as staff strongly feel that these steel windows are character windows, but they were voted pretty low on the scale. So that was interesting to me. Then a 2/2 configuration, again, pretty low on the scale. A 6/6 window, very low. And then finally, what ranked the lowest was just simple double hung 1/1s. And even this steel window here is a lot simpler than the other steel window, which received more votes. So that's how the community ranked the character windows that we had as examples in the survey. So for our guidelines, we would like to include character windows in our update. And our staff are recommending that character windows be defined as windows with stained or leaded glass, windows with the distinctive glazing patterns such as diamond shapes, windows with special or unusual mold configurations, windows with distinct or unique craftsmanship, windows with arched configurations, windows with unusual shapes such as curved or circular glass, windows with distinctive materials or a unique typology, and then windows associated with a particular style or window type such as bay or oriel windows. So these recommendations are based on our Pear City research and also what we were seeing people respond to in the survey in terms of character windows. However, we really feel that we need the commission's help defining what a character window is. Because even when we discuss it as staff, we're somewhat split. It's not as clear of an answer, but we think that allowing flexibility on simpler double hung 1/1 windows and allowing those to be replaced, but really focusing on these special windows in our design guideline update will be more reflective of what the community wants in terms of allowing flexibility, but making sure we preserve what is important in terms of those special windows in Denver. So we are proposing that we do focus more on these character windows in the future in terms of what can and cannot be replaced. We also would like to discuss materials more with you as the commission, because currently, as I said, we don't allow, for instance, fiberglass composite for historic windows. We only allow wood or aluminum clad wood. We feel pretty confident that we shouldn't allow vinyl in our historic districts. There are some special instances where we do allow vinyl, like La Alma Lincoln Park. We do allow vinyl there because that is part of the historic character of that district. But for most of our districts, we still would like to exclude vinyl, but we're not sure if we should open it up to allow fiberglass composite, which is not the same as a vinyl window and can potentially replicate profiles a little bit better because they can be special poured and molded. So we just had some questions there around, definition of character window and some of the materials that we do and do not allow. So for the moment, I'll stop talking and open it up to a discussion amongst the
What
committee.
is the thinking about requiring an assessment of condition?
So we already, Jen and Abby back in, I wanna say 2016. They already did kind of study this a little bit, and at the time, the commission didn't really want to relax the assessment. We did allow the assessment to be done by more entities at that time. And we did ask the community, like, what's the best way to determine if windows are deteriorated beyond repair in the survey, which I didn't put that question up on the screen. And basically, it was not to do a window assessment, but it was a little split on just providing photos or a percentage of components. But again, it went back to that main question where overwhelmingly people responded with, we should just be allowed to replace our windows without proving they're deteriorated beyond repair.
That's, you know, to me, there's an education and understanding point of view. There's a sustainability point of view in terms of embodied energy. And are those ideas or concepts going to be somehow reflected on how the commission decides whether replacement is appropriate or not? You know, it's like if the city's interested in moving towards a smaller carbon footprint, and yet if we allow for the wide scale replacement of windows that are in good condition or windows that could be improved dramatically with a storm window, isn't that sort of counterproductive in terms of, and even though we're talking a difference between the city's intent on having a smaller carbon footprint versus the preservation of historical material.
I think we definitely want to use the guidelines as a more educational component. So we haven't talked about this much, but the entire document is getting a massive redesign. And as part of that redesign, there are one-pagers that we're creating in the document. They're somewhat there now, but they'll be entirely different, where we will be providing that educational component. And I think Jesse has more potentially thoughts on this.
You know, Gary, you bring up a really great point that all preservationists think about constantly, especially window advocates. But our current guidelines do not address as a consideration sustainability or energy efficiency.
Well, or even cost. I mean, every life cycle analysis that I've ever done on window replacement shows that payback period often exceeds the useful life of the replacement window.
I know, you are preaching, you're absolutely preaching to the choir.
And how do we get that point across to people that are, because we want them to be comfortable and save money.
Yeah.
And how do we, you know, how does that
But I
notion
think
get communicated?
a lot of the issue is also the availability of people who can repair
Yeah.
windows. That's something that we hear all the
Yeah.
time, that sometimes people would be open to it, but there's not the availability of a lot of
Well,
contractors. And
repair is expensive.
yes, you know, and
Well, but it's not as expensive as a new window, and that's generally, in my experience. New windows are ridiculously expensive.
I'm looking at.
I would also say for the past 3 years, we have been doing webinars. Every time I have a window application, I do a good majority of the window replacement applications for our team. I always talk about repair rather than replacement, save the money, and they can increase their energy efficiency through different. You know, we do try and share this information. Unfortunately, the window companies have.
It's where.
They have so much marketing.
We were
behind
so
behind the
far
curve.
behind.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, you know, something that staff has talked about internally is, you know, is this the hill to die on? We
Yeah.
can continue sharing the message of repair rather than replacement, but also still be connected to our communities by providing much needed flexibility so that they can get through this process and we don't see a downturn in properties that are designated because it's too onerous of a process. So I think that there's a balance that could be struck there and we can still continue messaging.
Yeah, the comment that says I regret advocating, that's from a newer historic district. I took the district out just to help them remain a little more anonymous, but we also do hear a lot from people who are, some of our districts are much older, designated in the 70s and 80s, and they want some of the stability that living in a historic district provides them. But I will say, even from my experience coming from Savannah, Denver is incredibly strict on windows. And
That's Savannah.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say doing the research, no one else required as detailed assessments as we do, except for character windows. There were other communities that required professional assessments, just if you were gonna replace character windows, but they didn't have the level of assessment we do if you just wanted to replace a,
How do you
1
get
over
a
1 sash.
How do you get a professional assessment without a sales pitch?
Well, we currently,
back.
I mean, require
There are four
professional
people that do
assessment.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a different. Yeah,
And the key term on that is that they cannot benefit financially
Right.
from the replacement of
Right.
windows. So that deters them from.
like,
trying to sell
it's like an
windows.
inspector, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just feel like we're so far behind, we were not prepared for the massive marketing.
I
It
think the
does
thing
seem,
that would be good to, just to include in that one pager, depending on, as Gary mentioned, the life cycle piece, but, Brittany, you showed overwhelmingly people want to see a wood window as a reasonable
Yeah.
replacement. And I think, with the known bias in the room here, right, full disclosure, but a new window, a new wood window isn't something that I usually recommend when you can go with a clad window, because the
Yeah.
likelihood of someone who hasn't painted a historic window in their house painting a new wood window is just as low. And the cost trade-off of a storm window might be half or 30% of what a replacement unit would be. And a replacement unit, depending on if it's clad or not, or how complicated, maybe close, maybe less, Julie, like you said, but the character windows are usually far more expensive to duplicate or replicate than restore. I just think it's worth noting that the maintenance trade-off, whether that's something that you mentioned, the embodied energy in a historic window, stability of old growth wood, all the things we love to say, be what they are. The fact that you can put a new window in the house, and if you don't paint it in 5 or 10 years, it'll look as bad as a 50-year-old window that hasn't been painted in 20 or 30 years.
I can give you one benchmark. We have, what do you call it when there's a large lower window and a smaller upper window sash, but that one's stained glass? I guess it's a transom. That's, it's a 1 over
We call it
1.
a cottage.
Hmm?
We call it a cottage.
Call that a cottage? To get those modified to a dual layer thermal window. The only estimate that anyone wanted to make was $900 per, and no guarantee on not breaking the stained glass. So
That's
there's a
different
benchmark
preservation
for
issue.
you.
Capturing stained glass is a whole different,
Yeah.
whole different thing, but I mean, it's tough, Abby, to your point. It's fixing old windows is time consuming, tedious, messy work. There's lead paint, asbestos. I understand that's the kind of thing that homeowners don't like, right? Yeah, the tax credit is a piece of it. And that's a tough balance. So in spite of restoring a lot of old windows, I'm sympathetic to the fact that it's hard to wait a year or whatever that backlog is for some of the restorers in this market, and it's hard to justify that intrusion. It's a 2-3 month process versus a 2-3 day swap out also, right? There's a lot of different things, so it is challenging. I like the idea of the one pager, we have the little blurbs or whatever, but I think that obviously the same spirit as like a window assessment, the information in that one pager shouldn't be propaganda, I guess, right? How would
Right.
either side. But I do think that, you know, it comes down at the very end of the day to how someone's gonna maintain their windows. And unless it's gonna be an aluminum unit that weathers, or it's gonna be something that's aluminum clad. If you're not painting things in our climate, nothing's gonna last. And so, you know, that's where the life cycle thing.
I will say, I was actually surprised what went out on that, because even, I don't review nearly as many window replacement applications as Jesse, but every single one I get is always an aluminum clad wood window, not a wood window.
Well, I think the difference is like
Maybe we should
the
include.
folks that are doing the survey are probably property owners. And they're gonna go with the cheaper option, whereas a lot of the applications we get are for building professionals, and aluminum clad wood is much more expensive than. So that's where I think the difference is in the.
And I think there's maybe some biases kind of infiltrate into those survey questions. When I looked at, you know, who, you know, what the percentage of people were thought certain windows were character windows. And in some cases, it didn't make sense, unless you were looking at the masonry around the window,
Yeah.
you know? If you were just looking at sash
Add the
versus sash
and
versus
glazing,
sash,
Yeah.
I think, you know, so I think some people were kind of, you know, they rated a window higher as a character window because there was some detail in the masonry. Because why else would you know, there were a couple of very similar windows, the windows themselves, why would they be judged that differently?
And I think that's something we're also going to do in this larger guideline revision. Brittany's talking about these one pagers, but having more information on the actual bits and pieces of window that are understandable for the layperson is gonna be super important. And I think, you know, thinking back to you guys' conversations about, you know, repair versus replacement and the expenses, I wonder if we could even include, you know, some additional like table information that says, you know, this is how much it costs, you know, in this year to repair, this is how much it costs in this year to replace. So that people can see the dollars and cents of what it actually takes to repair versus replace. And maybe that would be, you know, easy enough for people to understand, oh, maybe it's better for me to do repair and it might cut down on replacement.
I will say too, like in the community meetings, we had information from the Department of Energy about how you don't lose a lot of your kind of, I guess, energy
Overall
savings
energy.
is not from the windows. And I know many of you commissioners attended the meeting, but I don't think you were privy to the chats where we got so much pushback on where we got that information from.
Yeah.
And that we were just like not being reasonable on where we were sharing information from. So I think, you know, like we are fighting really hard misconceptions that window companies have put out there in terms of.
Replace your windows, but you have to cap your fireplace chimney and not use your fireplace again.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's all in a wall.
Her-
Any
Some
penetration in a wall. can only
educational charts or tables and different, you said you did longevity studies.
Well, these were, you know, these were generally for commercial buildings or education, you know, they weren't residential buildings. And, you know, when the question came up, what's the best way to address a window? We did life cycle cost analysis, and we'd look at replacement, we'd look at repair, we'd look at repair with storms, without storms. And, you know, the payback periods were never less than 20 years. And at the same time, we replaced replacement windows that were 20 years
Yep.
old.
Yeah.
You know? So, and it has to do with, you know, there's no such thing as a maintenance-free window, whatever it's made out of. So maintenance is, you know, always why windows deteriorate regardless of what they're made out of.
Gary, we might be reaching out to you for that one pager.
You have to
cost
wash them.
analysis. That would be helpful.
They have to wash them?
Yeah.
I do think there is some value to taking seriously the kind of community concerns about like simple things like 1/1, you know, double hungs on a rear facade or something like that. I think that as much as I, you know, generally want to advocate for people to repair windows when it's possible. It does feel like, yeah, if you're, if that's being forced and that's creating a potential public relations difficulty, that feels like a reasonable place to kind of back off a little bit.
Feels like a little bit of overreach to tell you what you can do in your backyard.
Yeah.
Where do you buy sash weights?
All kinds of places.
I'm sure they're just like.
Yeah, we had ours imported from Canada because no one casts lead in this country anymore, so it's.
Cast iron all over.
Most of them are cast iron anyway.
They have modern
Yeah, well, with
instruments too.
thermal insulated
Yeah,
units.
oh, yeah, they,
We
So-
have enough room.
So
for-
Brittany and Abby, what would you
Oh,
like?
Abby left.
Abby did
Jesse's-
leave, so I guess it's just Brittany. and
Jesse's
Jesse.
drafting.
Brittany, what do you want from us today? Is this?
Talk about materials.
Well, yeah, I mean, we would love you to guys talk about materials. I think confirmation from you guys that focusing on the character windows is the right way to go. Additional flexibility, which I've already heard a bunch of those things. But as Jesse's doing the drafting and she specifically requested you focus on materials, I think some additional conversation there would be helpful.
To spin the materials even a little different. I think one of the things when you replace windows that a lot of people don't think about, and a lot of times the window guys don't mention this. What's left when they replace the window, and it's a different profile or thickness
Yeah.
or size from what was there, you know, on the outside, we worry about sightlines, and that's easy enough to say that you can measure. But on the inside, you know, what a return on the jam or plaster repair or casing removal, and you know, usually it's when you replace a window, it's not just replacing the window, unless you put something in a smaller box, which gets into the sideline game. Yeah, how much there's a fair warning in the one pager to folks, like, hey, think about this as a full project, not as a one for one. You know, window replacement. Gets more to the materials around it than the materials of the window, I think.
And maybe we can cover sash packs versus like complete window unit replacement.
are there lots of folks doing sash replacement with basically custom sizes?
Right, no, not as many, I mean, you would pull a lot of them out from the mid to late seventies and eighties, right? Where it's like units have failed and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think, you know, the way that new jams, even if they're thin jams, fit into a historic and that the casings are built over where brick molding used to be. There's pretty streamlined ways that you can keep a historic jam and still, but it does change the sightlines by a fraction of an inch all the way around, which is usually not something that we dwell on. But I mean, it's hard to get away from, you know, for a character window, certainly, I don't think we should deviate on the materiality, right? And then, you know, for something as simple as Brittany's last example of just a painted white, single, you know, light double hung window. If your vinyl doesn't last, period.
Right.
But I think the FiberX, I don't know if there's been a study on the difference between a fiberglass composite and vinyl.
It's a high PVC content, high polymer content window. Like 80%, like high.
And it's a cast product, which means that when the glass is no good, you're throwing the window away.
Yep.
I mean, the best case scenario with most of the, even Marvin Fella or anybody like that, is if your thermal unit goes bad, if you have muttons or divided lights, you're toast, because
Yeah.
all of that's factory applied with double stick foam tape and everything, but it's a full sash. And they upgrade weather stripping profiles and hard brick styles. Hell had this terrible sash release detail in the like nineties where you flip the lock all the way backwards to roll it, and every single one of them that I've seen in the last 10 years is broken, right? So it's the whole life cycle thing again. But I think it's hard to get away from wood or wood clad windows when you're trying to match a wood window.
You're talking about the sidelines and profiles and that sort of thing,
Yeah, you know, and the steel windows, it's easy to say replace steel with steel, but an thermally broken steel window costs you more than a nice car, right? I mean, they can be extremely expensive. So it's interesting that folks said, well, you should replace a steel window with a steel window. If you start looking at Opes or something like that, they're beautiful, but they're, you know, they're very expensive. And so I think like aluminum as a replacement for steel, you know, the sightlines, I mean, it's just tough. and I'm not saying all this because we restore windows for a living, it's, you know, when you look at a building and you look at a steel sash that has a 1-inch T-bar, manufacturers don't even make 1-inch T-bar steel anymore. It's 1.5 inches unless you special order it from a mill. Because we get those requests often for even new architectural storefront. And so, you know, I think what public comment on desired material replacement versus what's feasible based on how you define a character window starts to be a little bit of a slippery slope. You know, if it's just the proportions of a 1/1 double hung, a white vinyl 1/1 double hung window that has the same proportions as a wood double hung window is gonna look the same from 50 yards. But it's gonna look wrong in every other opening that you put it into, right? So I don't know how we split the difference there.
I
Or
mean, in the
create
past,
something, yeah, defined.
in the past, our guidelines talked about high quality materials. Maybe that's the direction that we're looking at, are these high quality, long lasting materials that we have.
I agree with the sentiment. I have trouble with the term high quality.
Yeah.
Because what you're really
So-
talking about is longevity and durability, and maybe those are the terminology that should be used, because we don't want to get into a quality debate, because that's such a ambiguous term.
Subjective.
It's really
Yeah, I know.
subjective,
We
yeah.
make the best vinyl windows you can buy.
High,
Um,
high degree.
But that's really what you're after, is the durability and the longevity of the material.
And actually, the guidelines do say durable material more
Okay.
than high quality.
Sorry, I misspoke.
That's okay. That's okay.
Well, and I'm thinking too, not only like longevity, durability, how often are you having to rip that out and put it back
Yeah.
in? But also, what is the actual impact of the material on the building itself? Like, does it flex and warp a whole lot? Is it gonna put pressure on the brick around it? But what are those implications when we're talking about durability?
Right.
And the impact on the building?
Yeah, I think the current material guidelines are pretty good, actually, and I think that the public. It's a very technical area that we couldn't expect the public to generally
That's
kind of
very
know about. And I think that part of the reason that landmark commissions exist is to act as a backstop against, you know, people who aren't maybe qualified to make these decisions to kind of help preserve, yeah, historic buildings and the fabric that makes those historic buildings. And so, yeah, I think there's room to be, you know, draw a little bit of a hard line about materials in that case.
So we did.
I think another thing to look at when you're encouraging people to weigh their options is what a manufacturer's warranty is. You know, as kind of a short circuit
Yeah.
commentary on life cycle, right? The pellet factory was just fascinating. You get the sales trip or whatever, so I got to go and walk through, and they have a lab where they accelerate saltwater weathering and UV exposure and driving rain and freeze thaw cycles and all of that, and their coatings, even the cladding, you know, carries what, a 20, 25, 30-year warranty, right? Versus, and that gets to Gary's 20-year comment. So I think it's
hard to collect on some of those, so.
it is hard to
really
collect.
is.
Well, and the insulated glazing units usually have a different warranty than the frame or the components or the weather stripping, but it feels to me like, you know, I agree, Larry, on the material piece, it's hard to back down there. But if we're looking for a balance for homeowners and for folks that don't want a museum quality, you know, historic window restoration or something like that, that having that flexibility in the replacement, but still requiring, you know, a nicer window starts to speak to, in a roundabout way, the value of whatever embodied energy or life cycle that we've been talking about, right? If we're saying you have a historic window that might cost you 50% more to fully restore than a, you know, mid-grade replacement window. But we're not gonna allow anything less than mid-grade, because if you went, you know, less than mid-grade, you're doing more of a disservice to that embodied energy. I don't know how you quantify that, but I feel like the flexibility for replacement is what people are asking for right now, not the flexibility of materials per se, only because they haven't had both, right? And so to start by saying, well, hey, there's a little more flexibility in replacement, but we still firmly believe that a historic building deserves the investment of a high quality or a durable material. Maybe doesn't perfectly split the gap, but I like the things that Larry and Gary were saying there.
Well, you know, if the basic requirement is a replacement window has to match the opening and the sight lines and the profiles, that's probably gonna eliminate vinyl right off the top.
Yeah.
Because most vinyl windows are made to standard sizes for new construction.
Yeah.
And those standard sizes don't match what used to be standard sizes. So, you know, just not allowing vinyl windows except in the one district is probably the way to continue.
How do you feel about other alternative materials like fiberglass, low PVC fiberglass composite windows?
I think it's a matter of how long has that product been on the
Yeah.
market and how has it performed? Cause I think was it Anderson Renew uses that, and they do make custom sizes and, you know, for a standard double hung window, it's probably a good fit as a replacement window. The only question there is how long will it last? And I don't know that anybody knows that
But
yet.
again, that's an example, or Anderson Renewal is an example of a high PVC content
Yeah.
window, not an actual fiberglass composite.
In terms of demonstrating the replacement is a high quality window or durable window, could we ask for a warranty of a certain time period? Is it even meaningful?
Full replacement guarantee for 10 years. I think I don't know what the standard, I'm not familiar what the standard warranties are these days. And what, you know, and are they prorated? So,
I would also add this in, so staff, when we were talking about doing these updates, we're talking about creating two things in our guidelines. That guidelines that can be easily used and implemented by the layperson, and guidelines that are a living document. So meaning when there are improvements in alternative materials, for example, a few years ago, probably 5 years ago, you all decided that you would allow the use of LP smart siding. Previous to the current Precision 38 grade, it was just wafer board, basically, that if water touched it, it would just break down immediately. Now they have it completely through and through. It's filled with resin with those wood chips and is much more durable. You guys saw that as an improvement in the material, a high quality long for a durable material, and have now allowed that. Thinking in windows in those terms, is there a way to, in your minds, to write in, you know, to allow for improvements in materials?
Well, I don't think we would write in improvements. We would just update the design guidelines as it's a living document like we did. We provided clarity on LP Smart Side when we did the materials updates. But I do think, like, talking about materials that are on the market now, like, I know Anderson Renewal, you can get a tax credit for that at the state. We do not allow that here at the local level. So that has come into conflict before. And so I am more focused on materials that you can currently use in other historic municipalities in and around Denver, receive a tax credit for, and we just don't allow it here in Denver. And like fiberglass composite is one of those materials that we currently are seeing and is out there. But I would say I like Gary's comment about sightlines and things like that and looking at that.
I could also see adding character windows as a particular specialty review element, making it more reasonable to then, bring in fiberglass composite as a possibility for replacements of sort of, other non-character. As much as I am still skeptical of fiberglass materials.
I think was it Boulder that had the
LPC
matrix of, primary versus secondary facade.
Yeah, it was cool.
Character windows or primary facade. Yeah, I mean, it was logical, but it was a little overstated maybe, but, but to a certain extent, like the character of a house, I don't know, I mean, I have a little bit of an issue, I guess, with the idea that like, if you have this one character window, you're keeping this one one piece and replacing everything
Mhm.
around it on a single facade, right? Now, if you're talking about the corner of a house or the back versus the front, but if you had a house that had one little cottage window with a leaded glass transom flanked by, a whole symmetrical facade of other fenestration, and you replaced everything but that one cottage window, then it's kind of silly too, so.
The character, that kind of bothers me a little bit when you say just a character window, because isn't it a character defining feature? And so, see if I can, and we saw some really fancy ones, some really pretty lead ones and stained glass, but isn't a character defining feature the window no matter what it is?
To an extent, and I think somebody who
Depends on
has,
it,
I mean, what if it's just but what if it's, it's like just a one of, a single sash, what if it's just a really, like, for instance, one of Brittany's photos where people didn't think it was a character window, it was like 6/6. I would definitely consider that a character window.
I think we
So-
consider that the replacements would have to be divided line like that, right?
Yeah, okay.
So I think where we somewhat landed on staff, like with staff, is that we didn't feel that just a simple like square 6/6 would maybe and let me backtrack. First of all, currently all windows are kind of considered character defining
Right.
features in Denver as of right now. That is what has caused a lot of concern amongst us as in the community. So we were proposing that we add a definition to the design guidelines of character windows. And introduce this concept to Denver. And we would need to define exactly what a character window was. Staff discussed it, and we felt that windows that were like just a square 6/6 or 12/12, like that wouldn't necessarily be a character window. You would still be required to replace it with a 6/6. You couldn't go to like a 1/1 or a 3/, like you'd still have to match the profile. But when we wouldn't necessarily say that's a character window, but we would say ones with like diamond panes or rounded mullions or things like that, that would be a character window because that's a special mullion pattern that is gonna be hard to go and get off the shelf somewhere.
Our discussion was really around like, is it easily replicatable?
Yeah.
Replicable.
I think you probably find if cost is driving people too, that for a big manufacturer to make an arch top double hung or to do a custom button pattern kicks you into their custom pricing
Yeah.
here as well, which
the difference if
usually
you want buying 100 or just 2.
it does,
Yeah,
yeah, and to
exactly.
double or triple the price of what a regular.
That's when the front facade could be handy.
Yeah,
So-
so I'm not saying that's a mountain to dime, but I think that the ensemble of a facade is worth
Yeah,
considering.
I
That's the
agree.
character defining.
I
feature.
agree.
So what I'm hearing from the commission is you are supportive of keeping character windows. We can define those, taking a stab at it. And we'll get drafts to you guys at later meetings. But character windows and maintaining those materials are very important to you all. Can you talk a little bit, there's been some conversation about appropriate material for non-character windows. Can you talk about what your concerns are with alternative materials? And let's chase it from that end so I can narrow it down maybe. So when you're thinking of alternative materials or materials for window replacement at all, what is important to you as a commission?
I have a question that may lead to your discussion, desired discussion is, have we talked, I know that we don't differentiate between primary elevation, secondary and back. But is that something we're gonna do in this?
We do touch on secondary somewhat in our current guidelines, so we allow some flexibility for alterations to windows on secondary elevations. We allow frosted glazing for windows on secondary elevations, so there is some
In
flexibility.
private spaces,
And
such as
private.
bathrooms.
Well, materials. I mean, if it's a wood window that's a cottage window on the side, you're gonna wanna control that, right?
So again, it's more about, is that cottage window a character defining feature based on, or character window based on what that upper sash cottage, does it have
No,
stained glass?
this is in the new sort of definition of, you know, the window that you're talking about, the character window. I'm just talking about now, if it was a wood window today on the side of a house in a commercial district, do we allow, I know we allow an aluminum clad wood window, but would we allow Fibrex or, yeah, and my question is why don't we?
That's what we're asking.
That's what
And-
they're asking, yeah, I mean, that's what-
And so again, Jesse, I'm sorry, your question was,
Whenever we're talking about placement of window materials, what are the most important things for you all when a window needs to be replaced? Like, what should we consider? And also, what are your concerns in alternative materials?
yeah, and so that's what led me to my question is it should depend on how prominent it is to the house, whether it's on a primary facade or secondary.
Maybe in terms of priority, a replacement window needs to match sight lines and profiles.
Yeah,
Yes.
First, that, you know, the operation, the configuration of the window. Sight lines and profiles of the framing members. And then next is, priority is material. And, you know, if Fibrex, I'm not sure what all the synthetic materials are that are available. And it's a matter of durability. If they can match the profile and the appearance and the sight lines, why would we be concerned? This is maybe a bit leading question. Why would we be concerned what the window's made out of? Except that it needs to be durable.
Right.
And how does the manufacturer assert that durability to the commission? You know,
Yeah.
that maybe is.
For warranty, right?
Yeah.
I think the other thing that was a question was, you know, how important is the operability or the style?
Mhm.
I think if you took a rectangular double hung opening and you put a swing out casement with a, you know,
Right.
faux meeting rail in there, you
Good.
miss the shadow
Yeah.
line.
Operation is.
So I think
Yeah, we've had.
I
that
would
discussion.
interject that, you know, sightline and mutton pattern kind of is that highest priority, and then a similar operation. Whether, you know, maybe like, obviously the way that in-swinging awnings and casements are now typically out-swinging and things, probably not a deal breaker, but the whole apply magic black line to simulate, you know,
Mhm.
which is what happened to a lot of buildings in Lodo when warehouses were redone, is
Yep.
double hungs got pulled out.
You don't have to
Storefront
use the old timey material as long as whatever it is you're gonna use looks like the old timey, lasts like the old timey, and you know, is workable, then you know, what it's actually made of, I think is less important than meeting the profile, meeting the appearance and the durability, you know, so.
But I think the eyes wide open there is you could say, you know, hey, if you choose to restore your historic wood windows, figure you're gonna paint them every 5 to 10 years, depending on which direction they face. If you choose a Fibrex window with a 10-year warranty, look at the cost of painting that window versus the cost of replacing it, and think about doing that for owning the house for, you know, that's where I think you could provide the one pager again. I keep coming
Yeah.
back to that, cause that's like our one place to put a stake in the ground
Yeah.
maybe. But you could, you know, acknowledge that, yeah, a historic window or door, your beautiful naturally stained south-facing front door is gonna be a pain in the butt to take care of, right?
Mhm.
And that's a real cost, but, you know, as you consider replacement options, maybe even something, just a simple pro and con table, right, and pro and cons,
Oh, yeah.
loaded legal term. Nate's sitting here, we don't wanna advocate against window manufacturers on behalf of the city, right, or whatever, but, you know, the idea that, have you thought about replacement? Have you, you know, or your kid puts the vacuum handle through the window, what does that look like?
Mhm.
Or, I don't know, you know, it feels like, you know, you said, Jesse, is this a mountain to die on? I don't know if it is, but I think that if we feel like you can make a case in the guidelines or in the, you know, in an official city document that gives people the background that we wish they had, but then allows for the flexibility greater than we have now, but not this 100% sure. The windows, as long as you don't change the openings, you know, do whatever you want. It seems like we could split the difference there.
So I'm hearing maybe alternative materials may be considered
On
on a
secondary,
by case basis or on less visible facades.
I think so. I don't.
Yeah.
think-
I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do too.
The full, like my house has vinyl windows all the way around the first floor, and it was that way when we bought it, and I masked them and spray painted them because I couldn't look at the white, but they exist and they work, so I understand that when somebody's looking at a $500 window or a $2,500 window, and then they've got 25 of those windows.
Yeah,
You know, that's an overwhelming project for most homeowners.
it is.
And I think that the majority of windows in this city are pretty simple 1/1 double hungs, or, you know, the character window thing in my mind, if a character window doesn't save itself by virtue of being something that somebody likes or associates with, at the very least, by defining and protecting a character window, you avoid somebody taking something out and replacing it with something lesser, right? Oh, that stained glass is broken, I'm just gonna put a clear window in. You know, but I think the price does that a little bit too, so. Yeah, I mean, the 24, 36 inches you have between most of the early 20th century brick houses where they're clear double hungs and nobody can see them. I don't know if the neighbor's gonna be offended eating their oatmeal, looking out at a fiberglass window instead of a wood clad. So, you know, it is a huge PR thing. We get calls all the time about it also, you know, and get pushback from people that want to understand why they have to. And so I understand the importance of making the guidelines relevant to the economics of owning an old building and an old house. But, you know, I think if we can make our case isn't the right word, but provide objective information for people to use to make a decision. It's hard to put cost to it because it moves so much and there's so many different things, but maybe magnitudes, you know. Replacement could be the same magnitude. It could be, I don't know, there's a lot of ways you could bracket it. But I'd feel better if we made a case for it at least.
Would you guys be comfortable with a more overarching general alternative materials may be considered, or should we go off kind of what the survey results showed and give more specific?
So the survey results didn't want specifics,
they
but I think we can go from working on some draft guidelines for the commission to look at where we ask those more specific questions. Because I think it's hard to respond to that without having the guideline in front of you.
I think the specific could be no vinyl and then on
Yeah.
primary
Yeah.
facades, that alternative materials appropriate to the detail of the window or the structure would be considered by the commission, right?
By no
Or something
vinyl,
like
you mean
that.
no solid vinyl, what about the wood fiber vinyl composites?
You know, that would probably start to be the grade. I mean, every single one of those is an extruded hollow core, welded seam, non-replaceable, non-serviceable kind of thing. So if you draw your line there,
That could be where the case by case comes in.
right? I mean, we allow Fibrex for any new infill in a historic district, so it seems hard to justify why an existing historic building that has a new building right next to it wouldn't be allowed to have the exact same windows that were approved. You know, if it-
Different construction, different materials that it's being placed into.
Understood, and I'm sympathetic to that, but I think to most homeowners, look at what.
Yeah,
they're
you should look at
looking
their
at.
next door
They're saying,
neighbor.
well,
So,
you approved that. That's where the postcard's great, like, hey, you're in the neighborhood.
yeah, so I think this conversation has been helpful. We don't have to solve everything today, and it seems like lots of people are
Thank
getting
God.
antsy, so I just
Yeah.
wanna share one more thing. So Jesse is working on drafting the updated window guidelines and we'll bring, I'm sharing my screen. And we'll bring those to you guys, but we have also kicked off our ADU guideline updates. And we're having our first community meeting February 27th at 6:30 p.m. It will be in the Blair Caldwell African American Research Library. And we are posting some intro videos on ADUs. Our first one got posted today. So if you're on our newsletter, you should have received that email, but it's on our website as well. And we'll be doing those for the next 3 weeks leading up to the meeting. We would love to have you join us at the meeting. But as Adam has informed me, if it goes over quorum, that means we have to do it more as a meeting, but this is publicly noticed. And we will eventually do some virtual components and record this. We just haven't settled on when we're doing that because we're trying to pull engagement into the in-person meeting as much as possible. So that's my final.
You'd have to make a reservation to join that meeting. At least that's what I saw. So
Believe so.
if you see more than 4 commissioners sign up, you're gonna let us know. Some of us have to stay
Yeah, 'cause
home.
I did sign up.
I forget what Adam told me specifically about if there's a quorum there. Well, that'd be fun.
Well, I would imagine what he said is, if they're going to be discussing business or taking action, city business, then it would be an issue.
Okay.
But if we just audit,
We just sit there and keep our mouths shut.
Yeah, probably not. I'll double check with Adam to make sure.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Tight mask.
Well, I really appreciate this just conversation. I know it'll be helpful for
really
us,
interesting.
but
Place the window has to have a warranty as well.
All right, I'm going to,
It's lasted.
I'm going to close the meeting. It is 27 after 4. February 6th commission meeting is over.